Welcome to the Monday, October 7th meeting of the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and I sincerely apologize for us being late. We had many interviews to conduct and other business, including discussing personnel matters and matters of real estate in executive session prior, and everyone was present with the exception of Commissioner Clark. And Commissioner Nagel, unfortunately, is ill and has gone home and will not be at the meeting this evening, and Commissioner Clark is also absent this evening. So, before I get into the community recognition, which is Kim here? Where is she? Oh, she's hiding back there. Okay. So before I do that, I just want to congratulate first our Recreation and Community Programming Department on another wonderful Harvest Festival, which was yesterday. The rain held off, and it was great, a great event. As well as congratulate our police department, because I read, and I think we all read, that the gentlemen who robbed the Wawa several weeks ago were apprehended. So thanks to police work by you, and I believe, was it Haverford? Am I? I'm sorry? Okay. Up Marion? Okay. All right. So, but congratulations, and thank you for that good work. So now we will move forward with community recognition. So, Kim, can you come up?
Yeah, I'm already done.
Consider it done. She's already impressed. All right. So these are the fun parts of our meetings, where we get to recognize our residents who give so much back to their community. We are very lucky here in Radnor to have so many wonderful residents who give back of their time and their talent to support our community and make it a great place for everyone. And Kim is one of those people. So Kim has served, how many years were you on the Shade Tree Commission?
I've never been on Shade Tree.
You were not on Shade Tree?
No.
You just volunteered your time there?
This was
Okay.
just like, in addition, Shade Tree wasn't planting trees at that time, so this was like a separate.
Okay. So Kim has always, for many, many years, run the fall and spring planting program that currently we are in the process of running right now. And I think there's 10 trees left, last time I saw, from the Shade Tree Commission. So if anyone's interested in a $35 tree, they can certainly reach out to the township and request one. But Kim, why don't you tell us, do you want to tell us a little bit about how that got started and your involvement with it and your love of it, and certainly the legacy that you've left
So
here in
just
Radnor.
very quickly, about 12 years ago, Radnor was not spending any money on planting trees, so I approached Chanticleer and asked them for a grant. If they gave it to the township, could I be responsible for overseeing how the trees were planted? And that's how it started, and that's how it's gone for the past 11 years. And so we replanted started with Lancaster Avenue and walked the whole part through Radnor Township and planted all along there. And since then, we've subsequently had different iterations of it, but we've been offering trees to homeowners ever since. So that's, and shade trees. We really focused on canopy, replacing the canopy in the township. So.
Do you have an estimate as to how many trees you've helped plant?
Well, including the spring giveaways that we've done, it's probably 1,500 around there, but I don't know.
Which is pretty amazing.
What do you think, Steve?
1,500?
Yeah, and I just have to say, I could never have done this without Bill and Steve and our wonderful, everybody over there. Bob has been wonderfully helpful, and yeah, it's been a group effort.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much,
you.
Kim, for everything you've done. Again, a wonderful legacy. We are so fortunate here in Radnor that we have so many people that care about our trees. When you go to other townships, you know, our canopy is something special here, and Just want to thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you.
And we have just a small token of our
Thank you.
appreciation.
Oh, that's so nice.
So I will read, Radnor Township's recognition of community support is hereby granted to Kimberly Dunches in recognition for your dedicated service to the Radnor Township community, for years of dedicated service in increasing Radnor Township's tree canopy that benefits the community's ecology, reduces stormwater runoff, and beautifies the township. Be it known that the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners sincerely appreciates and thanks you for your lasting contributions to help make Radnor Township the best place to live, work, play, and do business on the main line.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you
Thanks, Lisa.
very
You're
much
the
for
best.
everything you've done. I don't know if any of my colleagues.
Thank you, everybody.
Anything want to say? No?
No, I worked with John and Elaine like back in the day. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much. I really
Really
appreciate it.
grateful. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda this evening? Oh, sorry, thank you. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda this evening? Is there anything staff would like to pull from the consent agenda? Anything the public would like to pull from the consent agenda this evening? All right, may I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A through E?
So moved.
I'll second. Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0 with Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Nagel absent. Public participation. Please feel free to come and speak to anything that is on the agenda this evening or anything else that strikes your fancy. Is there anyone for public participation? Good evening.
My name is Colleen Price, and I live at 536 Atterbury Road. And I'm on the Environmental Advisory Council, and we've been talking a lot about trash and recycling. So I'm just trying to get the facts on the basics of what's going on with plastics recycling, because everything I read is our township is recycling. We put everything in our yellow containers. Republic takes it, but they can't recycle it because there's no market for it. So it's essentially all being burned in Chester. But if that's not true, that's why I'm here. I want to find out the facts, and I did try and file a right to know, and I was told that there's single stream recycling. I want to know eventually what happens with the trash that Republic takes.
So, Bob, can you speak to that?
Sure. You don't need a right to know. You just talk to Steve McNillis and Leah McVeigh. They'll be more than happy to help you on that and let you know all the details on how
Okay.
that goes.
I mean, in general, I don't know that we would have any special rights more than the rest of the country. And as far as I know, no one is recycling plastic. Is that sort of the
That's
general?
correct. And typically, the only thing right now is aluminum seems to be the only item that's recyclable. The rest is either goes down to the trash plant or it's landfilled.
Right, so I was just wondering if it might be worth telling the township, I don't know what we would do in terms of a next step, rather than have everyone think they're recycling and putting everything in their can, let them know that 80% of what you're putting away is probably being burned. And I also want to find out if there's an extra cost for that, because I think, maybe Steve McNellis will know this, I think if you put everything in single stream recycling and it ends up that you can't recycle parts of it, you pay more to take it out. And I think there's been a big upcharge to the township, so not only is it an environmental problem, it's a big cost factor. So I had sent it, I think I wrote to Lisa too. It might have been like too general for her to give me an answer, but I really wanted to get the specifics so the Environmental Advisory Council can get back to you with maybe some recommendation about what we can do. And even if it's just notifying people what's going on, that might be all we can do. So I'll follow up with Steve.
No problem with that. And then also, too, we are going to start stickering containers where people are putting it in plastic bags and other items are actually going to be tagged. The
Exactly.
tags
For
are
years,
being
they
looked
do it
at. So, and that's one of the things that when somebody calls and they say, can you please come, we won't be coming back. They'll explain exactly what it is.
Right, I think that's a big misconception too. People put their recycling in a plastic bag because you have to put your regular trash in a plastic bag, and you're not supposed to, and that's really creating even more of a problem.
And they did have that, the forum that Villanova University ran, and Republic was here, and the League of Women Voters, 2 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I forget exactly when it was, and the gentleman from Republic said, really the only plastics that's recycled are the ones in the tubes, and everything else.
Is going. That's what
Yeah,
I
so
thought.
that's something that we've been talking
Trying
about
to
and
find.
addressing, but would certainly be glad to have, and I think we did, ask you guys to help us with that and provide some
Yeah,
information.
we wrote an ordinance to ban the plastic ban, and then they banned the ban on plastic
Yes,
bans. So we're kind of
yes.
back to square one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you for your work on
All right,
that, too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colleen. Any other public comment this evening?
Madam President, just real quick, there was an issue raised to cost on the recycling, and it's something that we started keeping track of a few years ago when we started to see the monthly cost rise. In fact, about halfway through 2016 was the first time we had to start paying a per-ton charge for recycling. Prior to that, it had been at no cost, presumably because the company was able to make their money on the sale of the recycled material. But since 2016, the monthly cost for recycling for the township's grown from about $3,800 per month to the last month I have recorded is July, and it was a little over $13,000 per month. So it's definitely a cost on the township's end that has jumped up dramatically over the last couple of years.
And I'm assuming that'll be part of our budget conversation as well, correct? Okay. Any other public comment this evening? No? Okay. Then we will move on to announcements of boards and commission vacancies. Do you want to do that, or should we hold on? Okay, so we are going to hold that. We had several interviews this evening of very outstanding candidates. We did not have an opportunity to speak as a board, so we will be making those appointments at our next meeting. Committee reports. So the first thing I have is Resolution 2019-107, declaring the sense of the board with respect to the conviction of Philip R. Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay. Any commissioner comment to the motion on the floor?
I do, but I'll defer to if anybody else wants to speak first.
After you.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I think we're
For those of you, hopefully the resolution is back there. I hope it is, that people have taken a look. Make no mistake, I, along with all of you, condemn the acts of Phil R. that led to his arrest and conviction. That's not the issue. The issue is, why did some of the Democrat current and former commissioners support him and continue to support as president of the Board of Commissioners in 2017, and why have they decided to continue support for him after his conviction with public statements and letters to the court? We had a vote last meeting to censure John Nagel for his statements of support, which he has since apologized for. Nagel publicly apologized for his statements, but amazingly, the 3 Democrats, including Nagel, would not even condemn the statements when they had a chance last meeting. Now we have a consensus resolution. The resolution does not do anything but restate the obvious. All commissioner statements are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of others or of the township. This current board wants to distance itself from the actions of Phil R. and John Nagel through the use of this consensus resolution. I'd like to do that as well. However, we can't do that until we know the truth of what took place by members of this board as it relates to Phil R., especially in 2017 and later. Before we're able to put this terrible incident behind us, we need to have certain documents and need to answer certain questions. Before I vote on this resolution, I need to see what, if any, letters of support John Nagel, Jim Higgins, and possibly Lane Schaefer wrote in support of Phil R. to the court. The court sealed these letters, but they were called out in court for Higgins and Nagel as providing something to the court in support of Phil R. Again, the court sealed these letters, but the 3 of them, or the 2 of them, if it's only 2, can provide them to us. How can we say in this resolution that they are not speaking for me if I don't know what they said in those letters? For instance, Nagel could have used township letterhead for his letter. It happened just a couple of meetings ago when this board did the same thing and authorized a letter against my vote and used the township letterhead. We don't know what Nagel put in his letter of support to the court. It's sealed. I need to see that before I can vote on this. Moreover, Nagel could have stated in the letter that, quote, I speak for the Board of Commissioners when I say, ellipsis, close quote. We just don't know what he said in the letter he wrote. We must see that before we just try to brush this off with a resolution. Additionally, I need to know if Elaine Schaefer, John Nagel, and Jim Higgins had any communication with Phil R. after the day his home was raided on September 21st and before he resigned from office in early November 2017. All of the commissioners were present in the room or on the call on September 21 when we were told by the superintendent of police that his home was raided for child pornography and that his computer and various illicit materials were confiscated, and there was no mistake. There had to be some reason why, on October 9th, 2017, Schaefer, Nagel, and Higgins voted for R to remain as board president instead of removing him. They voted against my motion to remove him as president, not from the board, but to remove him as president. The public has a right to know why they voted for him to remain as president then and why, according to various accounts, they continue to support him now. Remember, we did not get his iPad back until he resigned in November. What did he do with that piece of township equipment after Nagel, Schaefer, and Higgins voted to retain him as president? We don't know. I and the public want to know why they did that, because the reasons that Schaefer, Higgins, and Nagel gave in the paper are not truthful. All the commissioners had the same information at that time on October the 9th. And in support of that, the township staff took action separate from R, and so did I when I proposed his removal. The Democrat commissioners at the time blocked the motion and supported his continuance as president, and Nagel is apparently still supporting him. On that issue, we know that the township removed Phil R.'s information from the website just a few days after the September 21 raid on his house. So the township and the staff did the right thing. And Bob, was that something that you had ordered to, or how did that happen that we did the right thing by removing his information? Do you know? You remember 2017?
That is correct.
Again, make no mistake, I, along with all of you, condemn the acts of Phil R. that led to his arrest and conviction. We had a vote last meeting to censure John Nagel for his statements, and the three Democrats who were here voted against it. This resolution doesn't do anything but restate the obvious, and until we find out what he said, we can't just gloss it over with this resolution.
Thank you, Rich. So I'm actually the author of the resolution. The first portion of it, as Rich says, should, I think, be unobjectionable to all of us. The second portion of it should also be unobjectionable to all of us because both, well, the first is sufficiently obvious. We should all be opposed to child pornography. The second is simply state law. No individual commissioner binds the township. We need a majority vote of the Board of Commissioners in order to speak on behalf of the township. Well, that's perhaps not fair. The point that Rich was very eloquently making for me, though, is that I'm not just uncomfortable with what John said. I certainly am. I certainly very much mean for the second whereas clause, well, the third whereas clause to refer to John's statement, which I heartily disagree with, but I also very much mean for this third whereas clause to refer to the crass, politically craven, cowardly statements that are being made by Rich Booker and Luke, Commissioner Luke, at the press conference that they gave. We heard repeatedly about Elaine Paul Schaefer in Commissioner Booker's rant a moment ago. She's not a member of this board. We didn't hear about her for the past 2 years. This came up when the election came up. Commissioner Schaefer is now running to be on county council. The Republican minority on this board sees an opportunity to maybe peel away a few votes from her home township, and suddenly this issue becomes a hot button topic for them for the first time in 2 years. If this were something where it was normal politics, then I'm fine with that. That's the cost of playing the game. But there are real victims who are involved in this. There are children who were abused and exploited by Phil R. and by the people who made the videos in the first place, and by, I am absolutely certain, thousands of other people who are downloading horrifying images of them as we speak right now. To turn them into a partisan political toy is appalling to me. And I think that you should be deeply ashamed, and I think that you should spend some time thinking about the things that you were saying and doing, Rich. That is why I have asked that this resolution, that's why I drafted the resolution, that's why I put it forward. I think that we need to say two things as a township. The first is we reject Philip R. and the things that he did. That is a fair claim, that is a fair call that has been made on the board by a number of people who came in front of us and by a number of different commissioners. I think that we need to do that in order to take steps as a township to put this behind us. But the next thing that I think that we have to do is distance ourselves, number one, from John's comment, which I do not agree with and which I find unacceptable. And I think we have to distance ourselves from the partisan, unacceptable rhetoric that we are hearing from specifically you, Rich. So that's why I drafted this, and that's why I intend to vote for it. And if, Rich, you can't get behind something that says that we are rejecting the heinous acts that led to the arrest, plea, conviction, and sentencing of Philip R., then, well, more's the shame on you.
Well, again, this is not about me. This is
Okay.
about the
We're gonna
commissioners
let
who
every-
voted to
We're
support
gonna
him
let every
and keep
commissioner.
him
We're gonna let every
in
commissioner speak
office.
before anyone else speaks again. So, Rich, you've had your opportunity.
Well,
Is
he
there any?
directed specific,
Okay. I hear
he
you.
directed it
And you can
specifically to
certainly
me.
rebut him once everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Commissioner Abel or Commissioner Farhi, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, I just want to make one comment to Commissioner Larkin's comments. And I agree, I think everybody does condemn former Commissioner R's heinous acts. But I don't think this issue goes away until we also, as a board, we condemn that 2,000 vote that kept him as president, because that was a political act. And that, I mean, I didn't see them protecting children during that vote, and I don't think you would have voted to protect them. So let's add that to this this resolution if we want to claim that we're protecting the children. Let's say that we disagree with that vote in 2017 that kept him as president in the face of this township.
Commissioner Farhi, do you have something to say?
I really think that we need to decide as a board what we want to do here. Do we want to keep bringing this up to score political points, or put this terrible chapter behind us and do what the people wanted us to do and do what we're elected to do? My belief is that we let this Phil R. thing go. I hope that after this vote, we can put this upsetting part of our township history behind us. We all know what Phil R. did, and we all know what what Commissioner Nagel said and how hurtful it was. But it's time to move on so Radnor can heal, and so can the people of Ward 7. Phil R. is in prison, and I couldn't care less if he dies there. And in fact, that would probably be the best case scenario. He doesn't need to ever walk our streets again. I saw that he got a 10-year if he gets out, a 10-year on Megan's list, I think. It should be a lifetime. And I think he should willfully agree to a certain chemical or medical procedure. But this is real to me. I lived 4 houses away from him for about 11 years. I could throw a rock or a baseball at the end of my property and hit his property. That's how close we lived. So this literally hits home to me, my neighbors, and my friends that live in Garrett Hill and Conestoga Village. And every time you bring up his name, you're re-inflicting pain among us. But here's the deal. My pain that I feel is probably nothing to someone that's experienced this type of trauma firsthand. So to open up this wound again for political purposes is painful, it's misogynistic, and it serves no purpose other than to grandstand, as Commissioner Clark did at the press conference called by the Radnor Township Republicans, if that's what you want to call it, a press conference. was 100% politically motivated, and the focus was all about a county race, not on what John Nagel said. Commissioner Clark's bait and switch tactic for political gain prolongates the nightmare for me, my residents, and anyone that's ever been a victim of sexual assault. It's flat out disgusting, and it's appalling. Mr. Clark has missed the most meetings of anyone this year, and it's not ironic when there's a tough vote, he's noticeably absent or noticeably or conveniently absent like he is tonight. In the past, Mr. Clark has asked for my censure. I don't want his censure. I want one thing. I want him to apologize to the people that he hurt. So when he goes home and he hears this, he can do so. Because here's the deal. We all know what happened at that meeting. It was run by a party, and it was for political pandering, and that's what Mr. Clark did. He pandered and he motivated, and his motivation was really to make the Democrats look bad. And I really hope this catches up with him if and when he seeks higher office, because we all know that he doesn't want to be a judge. But here's the deal. No, here's the deal. No, this is the partisan attacks. They don't help the township move forward. It's now tit for tat on both sides, myself included. This is terrible for the morale of the residents, the staff, the board, and how we are perceived by others. It's only a select few that like to see us fight. Most of the residents want us to do the work that we were elected to do. So my question is to the board, can we move forward, and how do we do so? Or maybe they don't want to. But if we keep making this a political game, everybody loses. Yo.
Everybody loses.
Yeah. Good. Then listen. But if we keep making this a political game, then everybody loses. So I'm open to suggestions from anyone in here. I'm happy to meet with them, buy them a cup of coffee up here, down there, to figure a way how we can move on and how we can put this terrible part of Radnor's history behind us. So I will vote for this resolution, and I hope that once it's done, that's it, and we don't ever need to hear about Phil R. or the terrible things that happen, and we can hopefully have a new dawn and a new day for Radnor Township, as well as Ward 7, the people that live in Garrett Hill, Conestoga Village, and Old Oaks, and those that were affected by his heinous acts. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'm the last one to speak here. So I was not at the prior meeting where all of this transpired. I was actually in Italy with my husband celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. I did keep up with what was happening here in the absence, and actually what I'm reading tonight I wrote on the plane on the way home. There was a lot of good that was done at that meeting, and many decisions that were made to benefit the many residents across this township, which is what we should be doing. That's what we were elected to do. I was very disappointed to see what transpired in the wake of the sentencing of former Commissioner R. It has once again put this board and our township at the center of a political circus, a circus we ourselves perpetuate. Censure votes and press conferences detract from the business of the board and do not reflect what the majority of residents want us to do. Keep Radnor one of the best places to live and raise a family. I've been out doing doors with many candidates over the past week and a half since I returned, and not one person has brought it up to me, either in a positive way or in a negative way. No one has brought it up to me. Several of my colleagues participated in a press conference to discuss in great detail, the acts perpetuated by Mr. R. The crimes of an admitted sex offender, and in the process continued to call attention to this despicable industry that trades on the suffering of children. To do this for no other reason than political theater is disappointing for our community, to say the least. And the fact that it was held in front of the statue of Emlyn Tennell, who is one of our most treasured and preeminent residents of our township, is equally appalling. For those who claim not to ascribe to partisanship, this certainly smacks of it. Former Commissioner R. has admitted to crimes that no one who knew him professionally or personally would have ever suspected. It is troubling, it is unnerving, and it is unimaginable to think that such an individual could so easily hide such a monstrous secret. The most important thing I will continue to focus on now is, thanks to the diligent work and the cooperation of many different law enforcement agencies, former Commissioner R. is no longer part of the Radnor community. He is in jail, and I would hope receiving help for a dangerous addiction and mental illness. I do not condone his actions, and I would never put myself on some sort of moral high ground and accuse anyone else of condoning the crimes that former Commissioner R. has admitted to and now been sentenced. I cannot change the acts of past boards of commissioners. I've been asked to do it before. Nor can I know the thoughts that motivated these decisions. I also cannot explain what compelled Commissioner Nagel to attend the sentencing hearing of former Commissioner R., nor the thoughts in his head when he made his statement. I do not know what he said and I do know that what he said had absolutely no impact on the sentencing. I also know that what he says has had no impact or influence on the business of this board. I also know if he had discussed his thoughts about attending the sentencing with me, I probably would have told him to stay away. This township needs a fully constituted board of commissioners to get business done. And I cannot and will not stop the business of this township anymore to deal with the personalities of this board that detract from our work. It has been happening for far too long in this township, and it's a time we dispense with the petty jealousies, the feeling of minority disenfranchisement, the ridiculous double standards, and get back to the work of the township. Therefore, I will support this resolution this evening. I think that we need to move past this. I agree with Commissioner Farhi that we have all heard enough about this. Now, I believe all of us have spoken. I think that, Commissioner Booker, you may briefly address, I believe, the question that Commissioner Larkin put to you. I am then going to call for staff comment and public comment, and I will ask that we please remember that it is 7:29 at night, and there are potentially children or people that could be watching this that find this disturbing. One of the most disturbing things I thought was the absolute callous detail that some people provided at our last meeting at a time when, again, the public is watching. Commissioner R's, if anyone is so interested in knowing what Commissioner R did, they can certainly solicit the criminal report, which I'm sure is public knowledge. So, Commissioner Booker.
No question was posed to me, but this was an issue that you and Commissioner Larkin raised. The Republican minority didn't raise this issue. You brought it forward once again. Commissioner Nagel is the one that made the statements that was in the paper, and the prior commissioners voted in 2017 against my resolution at the time to remove Phil R. This is not about us or me making a spectacle. This is about what people did and holding people who voted in certain ways accountable. Again, we cannot say that Commissioner Nagel doesn't speak for us when he submitted a letter to the court that we don't know what it said. We must see that. I move to table this resolution until we can get the information that I requested and find out exactly what was said and what transpired. And in 2017, in September 21, we found out about this. October 9th, I made the motion to remove Phil R. We knew what had happened. We knew about the raid, and the Democrats at the time voted against it. We need to know why they voted against that, and we need to know why Nagel continued to support it and what he wrote in the letter. Move the table. I have a second.
Second.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to table. All those in favor of? No, there's a motion to table. All those in favor?
Wait, discussion on the motion?
No, not on
No,
that.
there's no
Not
mo-
on that
dis-
type of motion.
Yeah,
Not a
there's no
motion to
dis-
table. On a substantive motion, on the resolution, yes.
Well,
Okay.
substantively, we should table this. There's a substantive issue why we should table it.
Well, I
There's,
wanted to table John Nagel's censure,
Okay.
but that didn't seem to happen.
We are
so-
going to, so there's a motion to table. I will call the vote on motion to table. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Motion fails 3-2. So we are back to the original motion. Commissioner Booker, I think you've spoken. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak again?
So I will move to amend the resolution, adding a clause after the third whereas to say, whereas in October 2017, the Board of Commissioners voted to remove then Commissioner R as president, but that vote was defeated along party line votes, and he remained as president.
It was October 9th, 2017.
Is there a second for
Second.
Commissioner? Do we have to have comment on this, on the amendment? No?
Why not? This is substantive.
If it's amended, it'll be substantive.
So what you don't want to talk about, we'll just go through, and the stuff you do want to talk about,
So
calling other
Commissioner
people
Abel-
names
so
for
Commissioner Abel-
holding people accountable for their
So
votes.
Commissioner
Point of
Abel
order,
has
it's
made
Robert's
an
rules.
amendment to the motion, or to the
And it was seconded.
resolution, and it was second. If there's no discussion on this as an ancillary motion, then I will go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment proposed by Commissioner Abel, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. Motion fails 2-3. Okay, so we are back to the original resolution. Any additional commissioner comment? Is there any staff comment to the resolution? I will call for public comment, and again, I will remind you that we are on TV at 7:30 at night. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a shame, some behaviors. Could I get the video, please? I'd like to put, my name is Leslie Morgan, I live in Ward 1, where Jim Higgins was our longtime commissioner. I'll save that one, Lisa. Before I start my more prepared comments, I'd like to address certain misstatements up on the dais that seem very partisan to me. Number one, there was also Democrats and independents at the press conference. They were concerned citizens. Number two, I've been walking the neighborhoods too, as I've been doing since 12 years old for different candidates. And I've done none in my own ward, so I can't speak to my own ward. I have been stopped walking my dog in my own ward, and people congratulated me that somebody was willing to, some group of people were willing to finally call out this behavior that, unfortunately, Lisa, when you vote a certain way, it gets put on, and those are facts you can't change. And people are still upset because it got brought up again, Sean, and it shouldn't have. But when you have two, one sitting, one recent retired commissioner, go to sentencing and write letters, people get pissed, okay? And there has to be some kind of leadership in a community. And I don't see any. So yes, I did step forward. I would have stepped forward if it was Rich Booker in that kind of trouble. And it is shameful. And I want to see the letters as a resident. And I can tell you, if you took a vote on November 5th in Radnor, if people wanted to see the unsealing of that, they would say yes. That would win by majority vote, easy. So you're wrong on that. People want to see those letters because we don't know if even Jim Higgins, who was very grandiose when he sat up on the dais, didn't spin some tails in his letter. I'd like to see Jim Higgins' letter. And I would like to know all the people who wrote. What if there's a retired policeman who wrote? We don't know who wrote. It's a very strange thing, this sealing, you know. And so, yes, and I think that people in Delaware County deserve to know who they're voting for. And to try and cover it up to say that Elaine isn't part of it is wrong, because a little history. There was a other predator, sex predator, named Bill Spengler. So we go from 103 to 2 to 10. And Bill Spengler's awards were going to be, one award that was given to him was, there was a vote that was going to be rescinded. And all Democrats voted against Bill because it was hurtful. He was convicted, 103 of his ex-mother-in-law. So excuse me for getting a little high on my horse, because I think you're wrong here. You're wrong morally. So I will read some prepared statements. Well, I'm not at 5 minutes. So I guess this resolution tonight is a reaction to the press conference, which it seems it is. You've said that we had to denounce, or some concerned citizens had to denounce, the behavior of our elected officials as it relates to the despicable, hideous crimes committed by our former president, Philip R. I understand the goal of this motion is for the township to distance itself from R's behavior as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, that can't happen until the residents of this township have some answers as to why some of our elected commissioners supported this man after he admitted to possessing child pornography. Elaine Schaefer, you need to explain why you voted to keep this man as board president after you knew he admitted to possessing child pornography. Was it because you didn't think it would be so vile? What happened to the Me Too? Or Time's Up? I guess R's time wasn't up as president until you said so. I mean, how is removing an admitted child pornographer as board president not a 6-0 vote? How isn't it? Okay? Fight over who you want as president after as much as you want. Remain deadlocked for as long as you want. But you should have removed the president, and votes count. Actions count. But you didn't do that, and then you misled the press. Elaine, we can't move on as a township until you explain these actions. And I want to see the letters. People want to see the letters. Believe me, they do. Let's move on to John Nagel, who is conveniently absent, and his weak apology. John, the only
You have
thing
one
you're sorry
minute, Leslie.
about is that you were overheard by the Enquirer reporter sympathizing with the monster. That's all your story is about, and it is no surprise that anyone because you, Jim Higgins, and Elaine Schaefer supported him to remain as president after you knew he admitted to possessing child pornography. Resign now, John. You have embarrassed this township long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Is there any additional?
Well, the only thing I would like to say is that there's a sad fact, and I would like it to not be true, that Radnor Township is the only township in America that had 2 back-to-back board presidents that got convicted of sex crimes. So excuse us for being a little sad about this.
Is there any additional public comment this evening? Sure, please.
Hello, my name is Harriet Anderson. I live at 849 Goshen Road in Newtown Square. I'd like to support the request that we find out exactly who wrote letters in support of Mr. R. and what those letters said, and whether those letters represented a position taken on behalf of Radnor Township. Those letters should be produced. If letters were not written, the people should sign an affidavit stating that they did not, in fact, write such a letter. We're not sure who wrote letters. We know that there were some public comments made that were attributed to Mr. Nagel. He's not here. I wanted to verify with him that, in fact, he said those things. He's not here. But I think it's important to know exactly what was said in representative capacity. And that will allow us, Mr. Ferry, as you suggested, to stop re-inflicting pain. If these people will come clean and admit what they did, and we're all able to see for ourselves, that's the only way we're going to be able to start healing. Another way, perhaps, I would ask each of you to consider doing something to support the child victims. We've talked a lot about people supporting Mr. Nagel. We've talked a lot about all of y'all trying to censure each other. That doesn't really do anything. Instead, I would ask each of you to come up with an opportunity to support child victims. And I would ask that you work together in each ward to have either a toy drive or a fundraiser to raise money and select an organization that advocates for abused children. And let's show everyone, Radnor Township does not support sex offenders. Radnor Township does not support people who write letters to the court in support of sex offenders. I would ask all of you to do that. I don't know whether it's been considered, but I would ask that all of you consider doing such a thing. I think that's a positive that we can make out of this. Further, with regard to the resolution, in the last wherefore, I believe that it should be further amended, if you would all consider, saying that the township further declares that the statements, not of any individuals, but the statements, once we're able to determine which commissioners wrote and said what, their names should be inserted where it says of any individual commissioners. Let's put their names out there and clarify those that wrote on behalf of ERA and those that didn't. And they should be noted And it should be further noted that their statements do not reflect the consensus of the board or the position of the township. Otherwise, that phrase is ambiguous and can lead to criticism, as I believe some of y'all are trying to do with regard to each other. Thank you.
Okay, can I just,
Thank you.
Miss Anderson? So we do Toys for Tots in the, right, in the winter, and also I've, whenever there's an election, I put bins, which I originally wanted for, lightly worn clothing for children, and I contacted like kids in it's in Conshohocken, and they didn't want them. They said it had to be a big thing, so I changed that to veterans. So it is something that is on the forefront of my mind, and I'm sure a lot of these.
Well, all those
people here.
things are really good, Mr. Farry, but
So-
in particular with the children that were victimized in the types of pornography
Sure,
that Mr. R.
yeah,
watched
I don't know
and
that you-
promoted.
Sure.
Those children need to be supported, and we need to do something now, not wait until
Sure,
January.
but I don't know if we're going to be able to find out who those children are.
Well, we don't need to know names, but certainly there was enough detail, and I'm not going to repeat it because, as Lisa suggested, it's unseemly. But certainly there are children that suffered at the hands of Mr. R. and anyone else here who supported him. They're equal, in my mind, for condoning or not coming out and really putting his feet to the fire and calling him out for what he is. So can all of you come up with a way in this township before the end of the year? Right now it's October. Is there something you can all do together to support these types of children? Not a coat drive for people in general, although that's worthy, but for children that have been trafficked, for children of sexual abuse. Can you consider doing that together? That's what I would ask.
I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you very much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Anderson. We appreciate that. Is there any other public comment to the resolution on the floor?
Hello, my name is Michael Horseman. I live at 263 Highland Avenue. My concern is when the resolution was presented on October 9th and the Democrats voted against it, have you publicly apologized for, do you feel like you made a mistake, and would you like to apologize for that now, for not adapting that resolution to take him off as the head of the board? I mean, how do you feel about that decision on October 9th not to take the vote to remove him, not from the whole board, just from the head of it? Do you guys feel silly about that or regret that at all?
Mr. Horseman, the only person that was on the board at the time was Mr. Booker. None of us were on the
And
board.
Commissioner Nagel.
Oh,
But
Commissioner
but
Nagel.
he asked, how do you feel? So you can answer that question. So you don't feel bad about it then?
So I'll take it as you don't feel any remorse, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horseman. Any other public comment this evening? Good evening, Ms. Bailey.
Tony Bailey, Conestoga Village. I was here on September 23rd, made some statements. What I found, a couple of things troubling, that after several people came up to the podium, gave their accounting, very troubled by Commissioner Nagel's statements. Mr. Nagel continued to face the other direction, slouched in his chair, gave no one eye contact. He never apologized, yet he seemed fit to make a statement to a reporter after the fact. This cannot continue. And the reason that it continues is because nobody, the majority of the board isn't taking responsibility. A censure would have been the very least. It's just a slap on the wrist saying, I didn't like what you said. When you don't do that, for whatever reason, you're condoning the behavior. It is not behavior to condone. If anybody has an idea of something, as to how they can remedy this, please do it. But this is going to continue. It's not going to abate itself. If you need to see a copy, I suggest that every board member get a copy of the process, U.S. versus Phil R., and get a transcript of it so you can see for yourselves whether this process was fair or not. Lastly, I beg you, I would like this to be taken to a vote again to have Commissioner Nagel censured. And I'm hoping that you will see fit to vote to pass that. He's not here, I understand that, but I think now's the time where some of you can redeem yourselves and say, yes, we did not like what we said. Don't make it a Democratic thing, don't make it a Republican thing. Just do the right thing. For all those kids out there, some who could be watching this, it speaks volumes to them that you all care. When you do these actions, it states that you don't care. That's how it translates to me. So, do I have anything else here? No. But thank you for listening. And please, let's just get this resolved. We're not going to resolve it as long as we still have, factions, as I call them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Any other public comment this evening? Okay, then I will go ahead and call the vote on Resolution 2019-107.
Well, again, as per, we have two amendments here. This board refused to take. This resolution doesn't do anything. It
Rich,
doesn't
okay,
go far
and
enough.
Then you may vote against it. All those in favor of Resolution 2019-107, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Abstain. Abstain. There's not enough information. There's requests that were made for
Point of
information.
order.
We can't do
You're
it.
abstaining from a vote on
Abstaining
whether to
abstain
call
from the
these
vote.
acts heinous?
Okay.
No, I
we
called them heinous. As a
Seriously?
matter of fact, Jack, just so
Okay,
you're aware,
gentlemen,
I was the
I've
one
called the vote.
that called.
I called the vote.
I called out.
John?
I was the first
you
one.
abstain?
I made the motion to remove Phil R. And
Okay, gentlemen.
and this
Rich,
this
enough.
board, the
Enough.
Democrats, Nagel himself.
Enough.
You're
We're
a coward.
moving on.
You wouldn't
So
vote even for a
enough.
censure last meeting, and in this meeting you
Commissioner
try to
Booker.
write.
Commissioner Booker.
Because there's a press conference, you try to write this resolution. Means nothing.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Abel, I did not hear how you voted. Are you abstaining as well?
I am, for reasons that were spoken earlier. I don't know what's in that letter that Commissioner Nagel wrote, and if that's on letterhead, that is a serious problem that will need to be addressed. So I don't think it's appropriate that we're taking the action at this time.
This
Yeah.
doesn't smooth anything. This doesn't resolve it.
Okay, so the,
Hold on, John, I think we need a point of order from our solicitor. Are they allowed to abstain? Do they have to vote?
They
they're
should
not
vote.
allowed to abstain.
You abstain when you have a legal conflict.
Okay, so is there a legal conflict here? That
Yeah,
would be
there is
my
a legal
question to
conflict
you.
here.
No, I'm asking the solicitor, I'm
I-
not asking you,
That's-
Rich.
You can, John, you
Quite
can abstain
honestly-
anytime you want to abstain. Don't pull that.
You abstain in this state when you have a legal conflict that causes you to abstain.
You can abstain at any
So,
time you want,
You
and
can all
there's no
decide whether or not
no
Rich
vote.
has a legal conflict based on what he said.
All right, so the vote was taken, and we have,
And again, the vote, with respect to me, I don't know.
We
if
already heard
there
that
was-
you're
if he used-
abstained. are you finished? I've called the vote.
I'm not finished.
Okay, so I called the vote.
He used the letterhead. We don't know what
Okay,
was on that.
so the vote has been called. It would appear that it is passed with 3-0 with 2 abstentions. So we will now move on. 2020 budget goals. Mr. White, I apologize that you have to follow that.
All right, Ian, can you pull up my, the laptop onto the screens, please? So I'm not going to go into all this detail, but included in tonight's board packet was a summary document of the various special meetings, special budget-related meetings that the board has held throughout this year. Going back to January, where we did a presentation on a high-level presentation on township finances. The board tried some goal setting in February. We discussed fire company funding in March, capital funding in April, sanitary sewer in May, stormwater funding in June, and then community organization funding in July. For each of those meetings, we did a quick summary on what was covered and action items and updates on each. The hope is at this point in the year that providing this summary helps the board kind of regroup on all those topics as we head into the heavier budget discussions coming up. And specifically for tonight's discussion, what we're looking for, what we're hoping is that, well, let me back up, talk about, part of the reason why we schedule these meetings. Schedule the meetings is to address some of the issues that for years we've been struggling with. One of the primary ones being goals. When trying to establish a budget, and identifying or divvying up the very finite amount of resources that are available to deliver the services and capital that the board wants to see. It's tough when we don't know exactly what the board wants to see. Or that we're getting very divergent directives from various board members that send us in different directions. From our perspective, each board member carries their opinion matters, and we have to respond accordingly to each. But what we don't get is consensus building and a majority of the board giving clear direction, which, again, it puts the administration in a bit of a tight spot when it comes to trying to figure out how to build a budget that meets the board's needs, knowing that even in years where we have 0% tax increases and everything stays good and we're funding capital, the budget still gets adopted with several nay votes. So what we're looking for is some direction from the board tonight that will help us as we finalize the budget preparation. Again, looking for what does the board want to see? What are your goals? What is it that you want to, what is it that you want to fund? Is it public safety, public services, amenities, infrastructure? And even if we don't get down to very specific projects, which I'm not sure this is the best conversation to do, at least at a minimum, get some boundaries or some lanes that you would like the administration to present within going forward. So that's the summary. That's why this agenda item is on tonight's, that's why this item is on tonight's agenda. And we're hoping to get some direction and feedback on where you want to go.
So you guys know my position. You need to figure out what you want in terms of dollars in order to run the township, and then just tell us where we have to set the respective tax rates that we can and cannot move. But Commissioner Borowski has suggested a couple of times that you should give us multiple different budgets, which could accommodate the ideological right, which says no tax increases no matter what the costs are in the township, and that can accommodate the ideological left, which says we should completely fund our obligations, and that there's probably going to be one in the middle, which is the Grande option. So I just ask, is there anybody on the board who would be opposed to seeing 3 or 4 different budgets at 3 or 4 different levels, and then we can find out what programs end up getting cut as a result? Because Bill, I know, just loves making budgets, and he's got tons of time and is going to just love this project.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Well, thanks, Rich. No, I support Jack's idea of having multiple budgets. The one item in there that I really feel strongly about is, and it actually may free up some funding in the pot if we figure out a way to fund the fire department and what they need. So they have an idea going forward, and they can plan their budgets if they know what's exactly coming from the township. So that's the one thing I feel strongly about is the fire company. I look forward to discussions on what other what other programs we fund outside of, what we need to, because I think we need to make some tough decisions on future funding, because we can't continue to just to fund everybody. Somebody, at some point, we've got to draw the line.
So with respect to the funding of the various 501c3 and other nonprofit entities that are not the township, that are separate entities that we provide funds to, we should reevaluate that entire process, but assuming that nothing changes, we must identify for each taxpayer the amount that is going to these 501c3 entities so that they are, we make every opportunity to exclude them from the SALT limitation on taxes for individuals with respect to deductions for federal income tax purposes. Very important we do that, and that's part of what we're saying. Secondly, we should not, as a Board of Commissioners, provide, we shouldn't farm out our job to set the budget to the staff. Our job is to determine, we can't delegate the job of the commissioners. The commissioner's job is to set the budget, to set priorities, and to fund the priorities that we feel are correct. First of all, the staff will provide multiple budgets if we ask them for it. That's their job. They will do it. And they're ready to do it. That's not the issue. The issue is we need to determine and direct, not delegate the authority to determine how to reach the goals of the township. So I don't see that we had an issue going in the past. In the past, since I've been on the board, we start with a zero-based budget and zero tax increase, and then go forward from there. We don't ask the staff to give us a wish list, and then we pick what it is. And I love the way Jack phrased that. Well, staff, you tell us whatever you want, and then we'll call out the bad guys who want to cut something from your wish list. That's ridiculous. That's not how it should be done. We start off with a zero-based tax increase, and then whatever the board can marshal the votes to, if you want to increase taxes, get the votes, specify what it is, and increase the taxes. I believe in smaller government, lower taxes, greater individual liberty and personal responsibility. We don't need to just raise taxes because that happens every year. We need to continuously work to improve operations, to make them efficient, to eliminate programs that no longer serve any purpose, to cut out what is not working in government, and to pass those savings along. In addition, what we've done is increase certain expenditures that are outside of the tax millage increase. So we've increased sewer rents 10% for the last 2 years. We've increased other fees. The board before me implemented a rain tax, and we have increased debt service to accommodate certain projects. All of that can be done and has been done without affecting the millage rate. That's what we need to work on, not getting a wish list and then demonizing commissioners who want to hold the line on budgetary spending. That is bound to create friction, and that is not civil discourse, and that is not working together for a brighter Radnor.
So we were having a conversation, or a text, email conversation this morning about an initiative that has come up in my ward. And Bill, you made some really good points around the capital budget, and Steve did as well. You know, honestly, we, in the last budget, or the first budget that I worked with, we have a list of capital projects that is longer than my arm, that haven't been funded. So, you know, I would be interested in seeing, and I think we tried to get to this in some of these meetings, we tried to start to have these conversations around prioritizing what is important. We did that a little bit when we were able to put the projects into the bond. We said that certainly safety was an issue. We wanted to see projects like that move forward, projects that had matches. You know, outside funding matches was important. We didn't want to lose that money. So that's how a lot of those projects made it into the bond, and they were all capital projects. You know, I think in this budget, we need to start taking a look at that and start whittling some of those down. I think that the process that we came up with around the bond was a good process. I know that there are, you know, many projects on there, some of them that will never fit into any of those categories, but are still important. I think that you know, I would like to see in this budget is definitely start looking at how we address those capital projects. We can't just always be a township that is, I mean, we need to worry about the services. I mean, that is one of the things that people find most important. You know, nobody wants to wake up some morning and their trash not be collected. That, you know, it is important to fund the services and the staff that provide those. So for me, those are priorities. But I think that we really need to make a concerted effort to start to look at that capital list and address it. So those, you know, I would like to see some of that incorporated into the budget.
Lisa, I would just ask, what capital project have we not addressed? In 2015 and 2016, we borrowed money to do a list of capital projects as long as my arm.
And there's still a list that long.
And 2018 and 2019, we just did a new bond with all the lists. So we've been addressing these issues.
So Bill, is this all, so these three, that's just all capital projects, Rich?
That's all capital projects well into the future. We addressed the needs, and we're looking to address the sanitary sewer and others. So we've done all that. What project did you not get funded that you want to get funded? Can you name one?
I'm not speaking to me specifically.
I've got multiple sidewalk projects in the first ward, although it's a stormwater issue and it's separate from the main budget. I've got tons of stormwater stuff. I've got tree plantings all over the first ward.
We'll put them in the budget. They're not. Are they on the list?
Yeah, many of them are on that list.
Well, why are they not funded?
Because
everything I wanted to get done was funded. Everything I wanted to get done was funded.
Because you don't want anything done.
I got the bridge.
Specifically objected to all the projects that were greenlit for your ward.
I've got paths. I got the trail funded. Everything that anybody has wanted has been funded since 2015, 16, and 19.
There's nothing.
That's not true, Rich.
The only things that are held up. The only things that are held up were because you wanted a grant or you were waiting for other money or whatever. What has it is.
All right, we're not going to argue this. The staff is looking for some direction. They want to hear from us.
It sounds like we've all bought into multiple budgets.
Well, yeah, I mean, to say my piece, I think the multiple budget is good, but I think at the end of the day, what's our budget? What's our budget?
About 42
Usually
million.
About 42 million?
40 million, yeah.
40 million. So I think that there are two underlying factors, which is the mercantile tax, what that's going to come in at, because that's going to be pretty much contingent on what we can and can't afford. But at the end of the day, you know, if out of that 42 million, and I don't know, maybe there's 10 million of what we can try to fund. But most of that money goes to pay for staff and gas for our police cars, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really what should be the big focus on, is that 10 million. And that becomes an issue of prioritization of what we want in those projects. And I think that we need to look at what those projects are and see which are more longer-term goals that have to be you have to float a bond to, which would be stormwater, which would be sewer, which would be sidewalks. So at the end of the day, there's just a really small, Bill, what's the word I'm looking for? Not elastic portion, what's the, after.
Discretionary portion.
Bingo, the discretionary portion. What's that going to be amount? Because then we have to pay for pensions and everything else. So that money gets whittled away real fast. So when we look at some of these long-term projects, I think most of them are going to be needed to issue with the bond. I think it's also cheaper to do that as well. To hit Jack's point, yeah, I think we need to see multiple budgets, but I think the focus on some of these longer-term projects would be to issue a bond.
Well, people keep talking about stormwater. There's $4 million we've collected in stormwater that has not been spent, and no one has stopped you from spending it. So
We're spending
spend
a lot
it.
of that money.
That
There's
money
not
is
$4
being
million
spent,
in that.
Rich. Yeah.
$4 million
There's not $4
that we've
million
collected
in
and
that.
not spent.
There is not $4
That's-
million,
do you
and
know
it is
how
being
math
spent.
works?
I have an engineering
also
degree.
just
Do you have an
Okay,
engineering degree?
okay.
Yeah, I know how
None of
calculus
this is
works. I
tax
know how
advice. None of you should
differential
listen to this and
equations
take
work.
tax
I
advice.
know exactly how
All
math
right.
works.
Gentlemen.
We collect money from these people every year for stormwater. It's the rain tax. We haven't spent any of it on any
Not a tax.
projects. It actually is an improperly levied tax.
It's a
Okay.
fee.
But the
Okay.
point is,
Not a tax.
there's money to be spent, and what you're talking about is we need to increase taxes and spend more money. And you haven't spent the money that you levied
Okay.
against the
Rich,
folks in
that
the
is
first
just
place.
absolutely false.
So is there
False
no-
talking
is there
points
no-
that
is there
continue to
no-
be false talking points.
No, is there no?
So I think
is there
that
no
what we need to
surplus in the-
do is have a
Lisa, it's a
productive-
fact. Is there no
Rich.
surplus in the stormwater
There's
fund?
not a $4 million
There is not a $4
surplus.
million
There's $4
surplus.
million in the stormwater fund.
Is
All
there
right, why
$4
don't we-
million in the sewer fund? How about the treasurer? Is there $4 million in the sewer fund, if you're aware?
Treasurer wouldn't be aware.
Is there today?
Right, they're already
Bob, is there
outlined.
$4 million
Steve,
in the stormwater fund?
There was.
There is
No.
not $4 million in the sewer fund.
How much is
'Cause
in
I
the
could spend it
stormwater?
real
How much is
fast
in the
if there were.
stormwater fund?
We were projected to end this year, bear with me, let me pull it up, because I certainly don't want to put a bad number out there at the rate it runs out of here.
I thought it was 4.
Come on. Oops, sorry, too far over. So if we spend all the money that's projected to, as part of what's been budgeted in projects that are in design or underway, we'll end 2019 with 1.6 million.
But we see what we have right there, 3,016,000.
Well, we ended last year with 4.2.
4.2 million was last year, end of
So this year, we
2018.
will
And
have
there's
spent
a-
approximately $2.5 million.
Yeah, there's a significant spend down this year of roughly 2 million.
And that's before we start putting shovels in the ground on the major projects. That's just the design work
Yes,
and
that's-
everything else.
Yes.
But that hasn't been spent yet.
That also incorporates, for instance, the Malin Road project,
been
correct?
obligated,
Like those,
not
that kind of infrastructure projects as well. So the money is being spent, Rich. Your talking
4 million,
points are false.
4.2 million, 2018, that's exactly their number right there. It's not spent,
It's not 2018, Rich. It's
so.
2019.
That
It's
was
almost
end of
the
2018. End of 2018, $4 million.
Okay, we can certainly argue this all night long.
By the end of this
So,
conversation, we'll know exactly what's in the sewer fund, but we still don't have a whole lot of direction.
Multiple budgets.
Yeah, Bill, just a quick question. How's the mercantile on those taxes coming in this year? Do you have an idea?
Yep. I have, whoop. I have too many spreadsheets open. So everyone can get out their magnifying glass, and we could take a look at this. Let me try to shrink this or blow this up a little bit. So mercantile for 2018 to 2019 looks pretty good. It's in line with how it performed last year, which, if you recall, in years past, it had been hovering around $1 million. So it has jumped up to 1.4 million, which has been nice. Where revenues have reversed on us is in the business privilege tax side, which unfortunately is a much larger piece of the pie. We ended last year with 8 million. We're projected to end this year at 7.1. October's an important month with the extensions due mid-month and any kind of obligation or payment that's due with those extensions we'll get here in a couple days. But so that amount has backed up on us pretty significantly. Realty transfer tax has done really well. It jumped actually from 17 to 18, and then 19 has been a really strong year with some unusually high transactions that we probably shouldn't count on going forward. But then the local services, which is a per head tax paid for by the employees that work in Radnor, that has stayed consistent. So that's a good sign that we have as many employees working in Radnor year over year. And again, this has been about $1 million for as far back as 2009 or 10. So this is going to be part of our conversation is, how do we react to losing $1 million-ish in revenue? A lot of the things that we've been building on over the last 5, 6, 7 years has been built on the growth of the business taxes. Some examples include, expanded funding to the fire companies, the growth in the OPEB funding plan, capital funding, the departmental and fleet type of capital. It was all built on the fact that the business taxes had been growing. Now, how do we react when those are going the other way on us, and how do we prioritize? Which it goes back to something I heard earlier, which would it's going to have to be part of the conversation. Is if there are services that the board no longer feels are efficient or important or necessary, that's the feedback that we need so we can cost those out and determine, what it would look like if those were no longer, part of our offering.
So to steal shamelessly from Jake, who was talking to me a second ago, we had talked about doing a millage separately for the fire company. That would free up a lot of money for us. And we've talked about, and I know it's got its own line item, but we end up borrowing from the general fund in order to finance it. We've talked about selling the sewer system. That would free up a lot of money in a couple of different ways, both because if you're not paying a sewer fee, then that money can come back to the general fund by way of a tax increase, which would not cost the residents $1 more. So it would be a two-step process instead of a one. I know you can't just raid the sewer fund, but ultimately the resident who pays the same number of dollars doesn't really care, so long as the toilet flushes and the trash gets picked up. And then also we wouldn't be paying all of the maintenance costs that go into that. So we get a lot of money back from the general fund in a couple of different ways, both if we did the separate millage for the fire and sold the sewer. So I'd be interested in seeing what will we get back for those two things.
So, again, I'm not a big fan of selling the sewer system, or at least even kind of talking about that. You could sell the sewer system. Sure, you help the budget for Radnor Township, but you hurt your own personal bank account because Aqua, they don't care about you. They just care about maximizing shareholder value, and that means increasing their rates. My big concern that I have when it comes to the business privilege tax is it's down. It's going to be down close to $1 million. Is why? Is this something that we should forecast every year? It's going to go down. The thought that comes to my mind is, maybe we lost a big business, but is it online sales? What is this trend, and how do we not look at it from a 2018 to a 2019, but a 2020 to a 2030? How do we account for that? And that's kind of because you bring in, I don't know if this is a case for you, Bill, or for Catherine, but you see these numbers come in. Where's the shortfall on this?
Yeah, so we can, with absolute preciseness, tell you exactly what's happened and why the number's gone down. We have that information. We'll have to be careful in a public setting, getting into too much detail, because the individual tax amounts paid are not for public discussion. But we can summarize by industry. We can do other things that are
Sure.
that we do already in our financial reporting and summarize it.
Is this going to be a longer-term trend, or is this just
Well-
a year? Is this a function based on a good economy or a bad economy, a recession versus a boom, or is this more of a long-term thing where, like it is internet sales, or people are eating at home or they're not eating at home, or a function of how society is changing?
Well, without going into too deep on a subject that's a little bit outside of what we're looking for tonight, and we'll get into the very specifics of this during our budget discussions, but we've had a few businesses leave, a couple of them in our top 10. We've had a few come in that don't have the same activity as the ones that left. The number of filers, the number of businesses in town are up. And then a couple of our top 10 have just seen have reported sharp declines in gross revenue. And that's what the tax is based on. So they're still in Radnor. They're still employing the same folks that they have been for years. And as long as they've been here, it's just that their gross activity is down. So the trick is, and this is for those that have been on the board for years, you've heard me talk about this, the trick is trying to figure out what that might look like next year or 2 years from now. And I can tell you that it is near impossible. There are no indicators that tell us which way that number might be going. The market, in terms of, the market itself has grown over the last 7-8 years by amounts higher than anyone, or mostly amounts higher than predicted. Yet our number is backing up, so there's a lack of correlation there. Industry-specific numbers are growing, but those businesses that are in town are not. Again, so it's difficult to pinpoint, what trend or what benchmark we can base those revenues on and try to track it over time. And then this goes back to Carfax discussions that are 7-8 years old, is that really the best way to mitigate the risk of fluctuation in these taxes is to be less reliant on those taxes. But unfortunately, that's going to come at some cost, either in terms of service delivery or what the real estate taxes are set at.
So instead of trying to guess or adjust or, try to compensate, what else are we doing, since the current businesses that we have here, they're impacting, it's changing, they're not making, the revenue themselves or whatever. What are we doing as a township to encourage additional business development? What are we doing to bring in new business, and is that something that we need to consider as part of the budget as well? Does there need to be a component of that so that we are constantly making sure that we have, a pipeline of businesses that are, coming in, that we're soliciting, that we're promoting what is attractive about Radnor to come here and do business, so that, we don't have to always say, this is our core group, and if they don't do well, is that making sense?
Well,
One of the
what I heard
things-
Bill say was that they are doing well, that the businesses are growing, the number of filers is up.
Said their
Obviously,
revenues are all
He said
down.
their revenues are
down.
he said we're seeing a drop in the revenue because there could be a lot of reasons for that. One of the main ones they could be apportioning their revenue to outside of Radnor, and So here's what happens. Businesses know, and businesses and people will all actively seek to run their operations in the most tax-efficient manner. And apportioning your income so that it's not sittest in Radnor is something that these folks undoubtedly are learning how to do. So business is better, business is up, filers are up, money's down, but I think that in the end, this is not a long-term trend that you'll see some things in the future. There's one I'm thinking of in particular. If we monitor it and make sure it happens.
Okay.
Madam President,
so-
if I may?
Yes.
On that topic there, I think that to address economic development, that's what we're talking about. The issue is there are some expenses to. There are some that are non-expensive, that there are no costs to. One is how the board's philosophy is on economic development. Is the board proactive with going after businesses, making the process easy to come through, or is it difficult? Where people, and there are those that are saying it is very difficult to do business through Radnor, and that they'd rather go somewhere else because they don't want to go through this process. There's also the cost side of economic development. Do you have a point person that's going out and talking with the businesses, that's making sure those businesses that are here stay here, and work with that? Redevelopment is a big key factor for the township. Does the board have what is your philosophy as the board? Do you want to redevelop what is here? That is a key issue because there are mixed signals being sent out of this township that we are not in favor of redevelopment. We'd like to see less redevelopment here because of traffic impacts and that. So the board has to make those statements. What is important to this board that we can follow? Is economic development and redevelopment a top priority? 8 years ago, I proposed to the board an economic development director's position or manager to actually, that would be their job, to make sure they have a pulse, bring different businesses in. We are more of a corporate headquarter and office community. We are not the Walmart and those, nothing against Walmart at all. What I'm saying is what do you want this community to be? And is redevelopment an issue that, yes, we should redevelop sites? Or do we not want to redevelop sites? Again, that is a philosophy of the township that we have to have, and then put those pieces in place. How to make people doing business here in the township easier for them, the process to get through much easier. And is there a clear direction all the way down to your planning commission that agrees with the board and all your various boards and commissions that agrees with that philosophy that the board has set out?
And again, we've talked about this many times. There's not been a project that I know of that has been rejected by Radnor. And there's a huge mixed-use development project which is on the agenda this evening. We have a new bank going up next to the paint store. We have the redevelopment of the McDonald's site. We've just been waiving the land development application for certain applicants. So absolutely, we have new development on new condos going in. It used to be the office for the doctor's office on 724 Lancaster Avenue. We have scads of new development, and I don't know of one location where we've ever stopped anyone from developing, Villanova and others.
To touch on Rich's point, we're also a community based on nonprofit colleges. And I think only one of them, which is two of them, well, Penn hopefully will pay, but that's a medical center. But the Barack Hebrew Academy and Valley Forge Military Academy, I understand, pay pilots.
That's correct.
But the other, Cabrini, Eastern, Villanova, they do not?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's something that maybe we should definitely explore. Obviously, we can't make them, but it's definitely something that's important because they're stakeholders in our community too.
And one other thing we talked about, Bob, for instance, at the pet store, it used to be the pet store in Wayne. I don't know the address. It now has the wine and liquor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's not taxable, though, at this point. It was taxable before, and now it's not taxable.
The only thing I would suggest is that watch the meetings, go back and watch the meetings objectively, when these developments have come through, and that may give you a new insight objectively at how the township opens their
So I
arms
wanna-
to development.
I want to try to get our arms around this conversation. It's 8:30. We still have, many other items on the agenda. I don't know, Mr. White, if you have anything else you want to present as part of this. But do you feel like, Bill, Bob, do you feel like you have some direction? Do you feel like you have enough information from us to at least see, at least put
And if
the
not,
budget
what are your
together?
specific questions?
From
What do
my
you,
Yeah.
perspective.
what do you want
is-
us to say?
But if you have projects that you want to see done in your ward, sidewalks, traffic signals, anything done, parks, if you can get those to us now, because then we're able to incorporate those in the plan, and this way we've discussed them all, instead of, let's say we pick up something in May and, okay, we want to see a project done, well, we haven't even budgeted for that, so we don't have monster reserves where we can just say, here's an extra $5 million, we can just pull for projects as they come up. Now, emergency situations, that's different. But if you have projects in your different wards, if you can just email those to us by the end of the week, that would be great. So this way we can start to at least get some preliminary numbers on, because there may be things that you're more in touch with in your ward, your residents, to say, you know what, this one's been coming up. Just send those to us and we can go ahead and wrap our arms around those too.
Okay. So does everyone hear Bob's request? So any projects, anything, please email to Bill and Bob by the end of the week. And then we will hopefully have given you enough information. And then remind us of the calendar again, Bill.
So we'll have a presentation to the board at your next regular scheduled meeting, so the 21st of October. We'll have kind of the 30,000-foot view presentation with the numbers. And then the following week, we have a special meeting scheduled, that October 28th, where we're going to hear from all the township departments and invite our community organizations.
Great. I would just add that, to me, the community organizations are a priority as well. So.
The one other thing that, just not to belabor the conversation, but just to get your mind working this way, is that if it comes to what services or what things that we're currently doing that you no longer see value in, we're going to need to know what those are. Because obviously we're doing it every day. We see value in the services that are being provided. If that is different from your vision, we're going to need to know that. We just can't say, well, cut $1 million. Okay, well, what goes? What is it in terms of your priority as a board that you feel like is at the bottom of the list and should be reevaluated? So I'm not looking for an answer right now, but if the conversation gets to that level, that's the kind of specific direction I think we're going to need. And it goes back to Commissioner Booker's point earlier about the Board of Commissioners being the ones that give that direction. So that's what we're going to be looking for.
Well, you're kind of closer to the day-to-day operations and what can be done better, so you got to have input in that as well. I know it's difficult because the impetus is, well, we can't do without anything. All the money that we get is absolutely utilized to the maximum. However, we have new systems. We put in a new ERP, right? We have different ways of slicing and dicing the numbers, looking at where we can be more efficient. We increased the size of, and Bob's going to say, no, we didn't. We added more police officers than we had under the prior. And I know that they were always, we have this allotment. However, it's a direct cost. There was more added. We had some things we talked about the other day. People cost more. What can we do to combine jobs? What can we do to increase productivity? What can we do to outsource and make things cheaper when it makes sense? And what can we do to get those who aren't paying to pay? I think that's what Commissioner Fari and I work on quite a bit. We have to make sure everybody is contributing to the extent of the law, and that's all that we want. And so we got to make sure we do that as well. But again, my view is for Sean and for you is that you'll see additional revenues coming in, if people keep their promises in the future. But we haven't stopped any development. When you go from Ardrossan to Penn to Villanova to the banks, nothing's been stopped. So there's a robust business community, and it's more and more restaurants. What we see is a shift more to restaurants than to corporate business offices. I think we see some of that. But we'll work through those issues, and we'll see some things coming on shortly.
Okay, so can we wrap this up? You guys feel like you have
Yes,
enough
thank
of what
you.
you need? Okay.
Could I
All
make
right.
one additional request?
Sure.
I apologize for jumping in. I'd suggest that we send to CARFAC the request that they try and work on what it is that is causing the decline in revenues, in the business revenues that we have. Just because I know it sounds like we have a handle a little bit on what the specific causes are this year, but it also sounds like we don't know why it is that year over year we're getting less. It might be because people are skirting the law. It might be because people are moving their businesses out of Radnor Township.
Well, it's
or
not skirting the
deciding
law,
to-
though. If you apportion your income outside of Radnor, that's not skirting the law. That's just apportioning.
It could be that too. I'm saying it could be any number of different things, but I would kind of like an answer to that. We're not going to get it today, and we've got this great group of financial experts who could maybe help us with it.
Let's use CARFAC. I know we don't have every spot filled, but we have a quorum, and let's use those guys. They're ready to go, and they want to help.
If that's a consensus of the board, we will pass that along.
I think it'd be
I'm fine
great
with
to have them look at business privilege and mercantile tax and get the sense of the people what is causing it to come up short.
Okay, do we have consensus on that? Okay. All right, go ahead, Bill. All right, I am going to move on to Resolution 2019-04, authorizing payment of change order 1 for the Matson Ford Road pedestrian bridge rehabilitation project, contract B18005, to Professional Construction Contractors, Inc., in the amount of $14,341.28. May I
So
get-
moved.
Okay, may I get a second? Mr. Norsini, is this you?
Yes, ma'am. So the change order total for the project is $14,341.28. It's about 3% of the project total. This is part of the share with the school district, so we're requesting the authorization of this payment.
So, but this will only, will be in half, so the school district will pay half and we will pay half,
Right,
correct?
so when we settle up, our exposure is $7,170.64.
Okay, and I know they're well aware of this, and, okay, all
And
right.
this is the only change order. There are no more for this.
The only change order?
And it was for, painting the rails and, some other things, right?
Some other items that we didn't see till we got, actually took things apart. The job was done well. These are just some unforeseen items.
And I have to say, that bridge over Matson Ford Road was built in about 1999, 2000, and it was part of the Radnor Elementary School construction, and really hadn't gotten a lot of attention for these 20 years. And Steve and the folks spent a great deal of time. The bridge is completely refurbished and looks great, really well painted, and all of it has been stripped and refurbished and put back together. It looks great. The painting on the rails on either side is also great. The only thing that I would ask the school district if they would get those diamonds that are up on the thing, if they could repaint those, that would be the best. That would be great. They're a little faded, but the bridge itself looks great, and they did a great job with it. So it's really worthy, and that's another asset of the township that we need to maintain, and they've done a good job with it. So this is worthy.
Okay, is there any other commissioner comment to Resolution 2019-04, 104? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of Resolution 2019-104, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 5-0 with Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Nagel absent. Resolution 2019-102, 155 King of Prussia Road, final financial subdivision plan. Mr. Norsini, or?
I'll just let Mr. Kaplan take it from here. This
Okay.
is here before you for final. They were here 2 weeks ago.
Good evening, Mr. Kaplan.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I want to say this is like the end of a 6 or a 7 year ordeal, or whatever you want to call it. We started with Biomed and,
Adventure.
yeah, I think you're right, John. Adventure. Why do they always call me when I... And we're done. Everything's done. We have final approval. We have divided the property with financial subdivision. Mike Kissinger was showing me pictures of drywall and going on in the Penn facility, so that's moving along. And we've now got final approval, and if you approve this tonight, we will be able to have somebody that really knows how to run a hotel, and Brandywine will do what it does and construct and operate an office building. So I think we're done. Every letter is clean. John's got the documents that are needed to comply with the ordinance, cross easement agreements and maintenance agreements. So I think we're done.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Kaplan. So may I go ahead and ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2019-102?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Any commissioner comment?
So there's not one outstanding issue, not one thing? Nothing?
Do I hear something?
Mr. Kaplan,
It's all
please.
done, Rich.
Not one open issue, not one question by any engineer?
Well, you
You-
have the two engineering letters, which have some meets and bounds.
John, we have...
They're
So,
done.
so, Mark, let's go through what we have. Why not go through what we have?
We have a later one on September the 23rd that is clean. Clean.
Okay.
That was the revised, that's what Jennifer did, the revised packet that had the latest and greatest review letter from Gannett.
That was the one that was added last week.
So do we get any more information on what, will it be a branded hotel or will it be an unbranded hotel?
I can't tell you that right now.
Okay, is there any
So,
other?
again, so Granite Fleming and there's not a single question anybody has. I mean, that's amazing.
Hey, Rich, we have final land development approval.
Okay.
Well,
That was all,
Mr.
excuse me, you asked a question. It was all clean. All we have done is drawn an imaginary line here. Why don't you let us end this already?
Okay, Mr. Kaplan, thank you. Commissioner Booker.
So, because it's my job to ensure that
Okay.
we comply with all of the, as a representative, I'm elected to make sure that we go through and get this to the extent that
right,
you have an
Commissioner Booker,
approval.
do you have any
So again,
substantive
yeah,
questions?
the final approval is still with this board. The land development final approval is not done until we say it's done. That's why, Mark, you know that.
Do you have any substantive questions, Commissioner Booker?
I wanted to find out about that, that hotel and the nature of it.
And that question's been answered, so.
It wasn't answered, it was, we don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know, but you're the only one before me.
But it's-
So I don't know either.
Okay, so we are not going to argue that point, Commissioner Booker. I think that there's the best answer that we have at this moment. Is there any other, do you have any other questions?
The other issue that I had was the stone or the concrete retaining wall that's at the end of the property. It's on the northwestern portion of the property. It's by the bus stop. That wall, that retaining wall, is very stark And I had asked last time if we could have Penn consider putting a stone facing on that to make it a little bit more aesthetic. Is that something you can take to them?
Didn't Mike Kissinger answer? I thought.
No, he didn't. He didn't answer.
I thought he did, but I'm not here on behalf of Penn. I'm here on behalf of.
Well, that's on
Brandywine.
the Brandywine side. That's not the Penn side. That's your side.
Okay, I don't know that that has any bearing on is in front of us right now. So
call
are there any additional questions from any commissioners? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment to Resolution 2019-102? All right, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of Resolution 2019-102, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Nagel and Commissioner Clark absent. Resolution 2019-101, Ardrossan Farms. Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Ardrossan Farms Lot Consolidation Subdivision Final Minor Subdivision Plan. And just one comment on the last resolution. I think that this will support our efforts around business privilege tax and additional revenue. So, all right, who is here for 2019-101?
I'm sorry, Lisa. What were you referring to with the business privilege tax and
The new development.
which new development? The Ardrossan one?
No, at 155 King of Prussia Road.
The Penn one?
Thank you, Rich. Yes.
So
thank you.
I just want to clear. So
Okay.
this board will need to be very diligent to ensure that the tax revenues come in from that, and it is possible that will make the difference. But once again, another approval for another big development in Radnor. Just pointing it out.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay.
If it happens,
All right.
I'm still dubious.
Gentlemen, we can count our money later. All right, can I get a motion? Can I get a motion to approve 2019-101, please? Can I get a second? I'll second it.
I'll second, so you don't have to.
I already did. That's all right. I can second. Okay, who is introducing this? Who is
Commissioner,
here?
this is, we have Momini and Associates as well as the attorney for Edward Scott III for Ardrossan. This is lot line change discussed in caucus, now here for final. They've moved through clean review letters, ready to be before you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. I think we were here before explaining to you that we are consolidating a number of non-developable lots that are being consolidated as part of the Natural Lands Trust. So our plan in front of you was for a lot consolidation plan to consolidate several lots.
Okay, does anyone have any questions around 2019-101? All right, is there any staff comment?
Well, one question, just in general.
Just one?
Just one. With respect to the Ardrossan development, which is another development that the township approved, and there was also a process for what was the process we did for Ardrossan? It was to increase the number of
That was your one question.
We
That
did
was
a
your
density.
one question.
We did a density modification.
Where we actually reduced the number
Right,
of lots.
right.
that were
But
allowed.
so we did a density modification so we could have more lots and people.
Less lots, Rich.
But we had more density. We were
Part of the density
making.
modification was to change the lot areas where the AC district requires 2-acre lots.
2-acre lots, we allowed as low as 3/4.
We allowed smaller lots.
Smaller lots,
And
right.
that was part of the condition.
That was part of the condition.
There were no additional lots.
Right, no additional lots. However, we allowed smaller lots, and that was felt at the time to be necessary for marketing. And
That created a lot more open area.
fine, and it was also part of the plan so that we didn't have to have all 2-acre lots. And at the time, we wanted to have those smaller lots, but you all have been back before us 4, 5, 6, 7 times doing these consolidations, making bigger lots again. So in hindsight, was the density modification necessary, or would we have been better off just leaving it without the density modification?
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't really have to relitigate this at this point, but just so we're aware, so you know.
There was no litigation, we went through a process and we approved
So basically
it.
what happens when you do the density modification, and what this project yielded was less homes on this farm, which was vastly agreed, bipartisan across the township as being a better use of this land, producing more open space with less homes. What you're seeing now is a developer who has buyers who are interested in owning more land. So you're reducing still from that already reduced number, the number of homes on the property. We see that as a huge benefit to everyone involved, because now you're getting less homes on this farm, which people wanted to preserve. So your ordinance allows for density modification. We took advantage of that, but in the end, you've got less homes. That's a good thing from a preservation standpoint. It's what people wanted. So we're continuing to foster and push that overall desire for less development on that farm. It turns into a net win across the board.
I absolutely disagree. There was the general consensus not to develop anything, but if we were going to develop, we would. But the point is, you could have had all 2-acre lots and done whatever you wanted with the 2-acre lots, and then we wouldn't have had to. And remember, there was a lot of dissent in the neighborhood. There was the Friends to Preserve Radnor who fought the whole thing, primarily based on we were going to have 3/4-acre lots instead
Do you know
of.
how many homes would yield?
Yeah, I went through the whole thing.
Gentlemen,
but the question
Rich,
is,
do you
wouldn't
have
we?
a question
Yeah, my
regarding the resolution
My
that is
question
before
again
us?
was, wouldn't it seems to me that we would have been better off just without the density modification and having
With
larger
154
lots
homes.
and having larger lots to begin with.
With 154
Well,
homes.
you could have.
Is that what you wanted?
Okay, all right, gentlemen, we're not going to.
We could have done the same thing with those 154 lots, and we could have said, "Hey,
okay, Rich,
convert them
Rich,
to land trusts as
Rich.
well."
I think you're arguing.
We are not. We are not doing revisionist history, gentlemen.
I'm asking, but you've been coming to me.
Rich, you are being extremely combative. It is unnecessary. I have not heard you ask a question that is specific to Resolution 2019-101. You are not. You are trying to do revisionist history about something that has been done, and there are people in the public who would like to speak. I don't hear a question. You're just arguing to be combative. So we are not going to do it anymore unless you have a specific question. I'm going to open it up to the rest of the commissioners if anyone has a question, and then I'm going to ask for public comment. So do you have a specific question?
Yes, I have a specific question.
Then please ask it.
Wouldn't we have been better off not doing the density modification and having, if this people, the Scott family and Saul Ewing have been before us 6 times or more for density modifications or for consolidations or other changes. Why do we need so many times for you coming before us? It seems to me that we didn't do a good job of laying this out in the first place. And we went through an extensive procedure to get the layout just the way the developer wanted it at the time.
I'm happy to answer. It seems rhetorical, but.
Please.
Yeah, so
All right, don't answer. If you don't want to answer, don't answer. I made my point.
In my opinion,
but I would ask developers to get it right in the first time.
Are there any other commissioners that have a comment with regards to Resolution 2019-101? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment?
I have a question. So this National Lands Trust, that's not taxed. Okay, North American, it's now considered not taxable land, is that right?
These were part of the development, Catherine, if you remember. There were areas of the property that were not residentially approved that were to be ultimately sold or gifted to the land trust. That was part of the original approval of the plat. That's happened, and as part of NALT, which is North American Land Trust, as part of kind of making it easier for them to take this land, we're consolidating those pieces of property into single lots rather than having multiple little lots, but it's still the same land. It's just a lot consolidation. But these are being transferred to North American Land Trust as was intended as part of the original development.
Okay, and that's not taxed? Right.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
non-taxable entity.
Non-taxable. And can other people enjoy this land? Can
Sure.
people walk on it, the
It's-
public?
it's an
That-
open
I've had people ask me the question.
Yeah, I
so-
believe it's an open space area. They'll have an easement placed on it, I believe, that will control how it's maintained. Generally, they're for public purposes and for public use, but they are restricted from development.
But the public can't get onto the property. It's not open to the public. Ardrossan's private.
The residents in there can use it. It's not their property.
Well, it's,
Okay.
so it's
All
not the
right.
general public, it's the public in Ardrossan.
Rich, it is no
Just be
longer
clear
commissioner
what it
comment.
is.
They're
Okay.
restricted from development. That's the nature of the land. And they'll be controlled by restrictions that NALT puts on the property against development. That's the purpose of the eased land. Is to make sure there's no homes there.
Mhm.
That's it. But that was all part of the original approval.
Okay. Any other additional questions? All right, now I will call for public comment. Ms. Quigley.
My name's Debbie Quigley, and I was here at the last meeting, and I just asked for some transparency about the maps, and they were supposed to provide it to the homeowners in Ardrossan, and we haven't received anything, but I just wanted to state for the record, they were told to, just so we could see what they're talking about, the lot line changes.
Okay, so you want to see an overall map, or, I'm sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting.
If the line changes were made, the owners would like to see what's being done.
I believe
Can you
that's in
guys-
the packet.
Yeah, but can you show that right now?
And wasn't there also an question you had about maintenance of it? Who was going to be maintained?
Maintain it. So the homeowners really maintain the property there through dues that we pay. So I want to make sure that we're aware of, so that we can see what they're doing for the property that we're paying to maintain.
Do you mind pointing out to Debbie where?
Yeah, there were a number of open space areas. What we call North Light 9 was open space. This area down here was open space. There were a couple, I'm sorry. There were portions of the site that were either open space or NRA lots, non-residentially approved. There were 4 or 5 lots in here. There were a couple, same thing in here. Number of residential lots along the Ayrshire Drive that all were individual lots. Couple along the roadway that are just being consolidated into one larger parcel instead of not having 10 or 12 individual smaller lots. We've more or less combined them into larger lots that would be able to be deeded accordingly.
And is there a reason, can the residents have a copy of this map? Is that?
Sure.
Can we provide that to them?
Certainly
But it
will.
is in the packet, correct? Was it in the packet?
Should have been.
Yeah.
It's the same
Right.
plans there's the plan sheets are in the packet noting the NALT parcels that are going to be maintained by the Ardrossan HOA.
Okay, so that's all in the packet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Debbie, we'll pull those out. We can pull those out and get those to you. Steve, would you mind sending that to me?
Before you
as a
pull that
PDF?
off.
Yep.
Then the other thing from last meeting was we wanted to ensure that there was adequate documentation and notation that these driveways that look like roads will always in perpetuity be maintained and plowed for snow by the homeowners association and not by the township. So we have that documented, right? We got that covered.
Correct. That was something early on, Commissioner Booker, I had given to Mr. Fiorello, that we want a color-coded map, because I need to give that to Public Works, so there's no confusion whatsoever as far as what the township owns and maintains and what the HOAs or various single home zones. So that's taken care of.
It is all documented in the homeowners' documents, and as Steve noted, we promised to provide them with a plan showing which one so that it will be on record with the township.
And for the other point, is there any way we can get the public, the general public who don't live on Ardrossan, to be able to enjoy some of these lots, or there's just no way that the public has access if you live on outside Ardrossan?
We need the trails. We need money for the trails.
John's shaking his head. There's no way to get.
The township has 70 acres over there.
And they are public roads.
And we need money for the trails.
But 70
So-
acres, but we don't have access to these portions,
Right.
these interior
Okay.
lots.
All right.
Because the township doesn't own them.
Is there any additional public comment? right, I'm going to call
Madam
the.
President, if I may?
Yes.
Based on that, I would ask, because this is now another subdivision plan for lot consolidation, that an item be added on here that the developer will contribute $1 million towards the trails that will benefit the homeowners in this whole development. So I'd ask that that be made a condition.
I would make that a condition if we can do it. I think, so John, you can opine on that. And also the other issue, didn't we have some issue about trees? Weren't there some trees that were degrading?
The buffer that has been fixed.
The trees have been fixed,
The
Bob?
buffer has been fixed.
Okay, trees have been fixed? They cleaned up the trees?
The buffer has been fixed.
So, I mean, I appreciate what Mr. Zinkowski's asking for there as a resident of the township, but the applicant can't agree to a condition like that. If the board were to require it, we wouldn't accept it. But thank you.
I'm back at the developer on this. I think the developer should contribute to this. He contributed nothing to anything
Well, I think
here,
that
so.
I think that that's something that we should discuss offline and bring back to the board if that's something. I don't think that that's something we should do here in public where it looks, or as part of a condition of a plan, because to me that looks like extortion.
I would take exception to that. I think the developer has
It's
gotten
inappropriate,
huge
Mr.
benefits.
Zinkowski. Mr. Zinkowski, it's inappropriate.
Lisa, the developer can agree to any condition he wants
Well,
to
the
agree
developer
to.
has said that he will not.
Conditions
His
have to
lawyer.
be based on your ordinances or on some other state law, especially those types of conditions. You have a park and rec fee, I think it's been paid on this. But it would be something worthwhile talking about.
Can we pursue that?
For future,
Can we pursue
for
that?
future subdivisions.
For future developers, not for Ardrossan. There's no reason to talk about it anymore, right?
Well, the plan's been approved. You can't attach additional conditions, especially a condition that's not based on the township ordinances.
But if,
And then
if-
we wonder why people don't want to come and develop in Radnor. So
Oh,
I am
I don't
going to,
think
I am
that comes
going to
back to
call,
me. I think
I
that-
am going to
that's
call the vote
proper.
on this, Mr.
Because-
Zinkowski.
Well, I'm going to ask Mr. Rice here.
Mr.
When the
Zinkowski.
original plan was
Mr.
adopted by the
Zinkowski.
board, those plans
Mr.
were not
Zinkowski,
submitted.
I am calling the vote on this.
Wait, well, hold on. But
I am
but Bob
calling the
makes a
vote.
point.
All those in
This was
favor
not
of
the plan.
Resolution 2019-101, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 4-1. Moving forward, consideration to forward the petition, thank you very much. Consideration to forward the petition of 210 North Aberdeen Associates LLC, amending Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township Code zoning ordinance by establishing regulations to permit certain residential uses within the C3 Service Commercial District to the Township's Planning Commission and/or other township boards, commissions, and committees for review and comment. I'm not sure
Is
who's
this-
leading this discussion.
Is this what to do with this?
Okay.
Evening, Nick
Hey.
Cornelia, representing the applicant. And just a brief overview, Christy Flynn, who's a principal senior vice president of Rockwell Custom Builders, who actually lives probably about 4 doors away from this development, will be doing the presentation. Rockwell is actually a company that's owned in its entirety by Greg Lingo, who lives on Lansdowne Avenue, also in Wayne. So we do have local people that are proposing this, local township residents. What it involves is basically an amendment to our C3 zoning district. I think, as you know, C3 zoning in Radnor is the most intensive zoning in the township, permits all sorts of commercial uses. But like all other commercial districts in Radnor, it does not permit residential type development. And what we're proposing here is a mixed-use type of development that would permit the C3 uses as well as residential uses as permitted in the R5 zoning district.
Nick, I want to break in just for a moment just to say, because you said it does not permit residential development, that sounds like we're going to be putting, if this passes, a bunch of residences in what is already like a commercial area. But this area is at least 50% residential as things stand right now.
Actually, maybe even more. As you'll see the photographs, and if you recall, as you go under, it's on North Aberdeen, you go under the Little Chicago Bridge, and it's on the left-hand side there, and you have a number of residences and multifamily type developments there. You do have a smattering of commercial. What this proposal is only along the R5 zoning district. It has to be adjacent to the R5 district, and you'll see a plan. You see it here right now. It's those areas outlined in red which would be affected. As Christy will explain to you, there's actually 3 areas in Radnor that are C3 zoning. One is the car wash at Conestoga and Lancaster. That would not fall under this because of one of the requirements is that it has to be 450 feet from an arterial being Lancaster Avenue. The other C3 zoning districts, the site of the old Acme site, which is now the strip area that has the pizzeria, or not pizzeria, it has the pizza place, it has a number of restaurants, yeah, exactly, along Lancaster Avenue. That would not be applicable either because, again, is within 400 feet of the arterial. So the only area that would be applicable to would be this area on the north side of the railroad tracks that is adjacent to the R5 zoning district. So Christy has some exhibits that are included in that plan, and she'll go through it. One item that I would like to note is that part of this ordinance actually increases, or I should say reduces, the impervious coverage requirement. Actually, impervious coverage in this district now is at 65%, is reduced to 60%. So it will provide for a greater greenscape than in what is actually currently permitted in that district. Christy?
Thanks, Nick. I'm Christy Flynn, and as Nick mentioned, I live within eye view of this site. So this area. So I think a couple of points. The C3 zone has a reference in the purpose of it to deal with automobile highway-oriented uses, and it's very clear that this piece of C3, one of the 3, is not connected to a highway in any meaningful way. In fact, the bridge on North Aberdeen is too low for large trucks to fit underneath, so it's not really a suitable place for high-intensity commercial, automobile-focused commercial use. Nick's exactly right that there is residential throughout this area, and I'll show you some of those images as well. So in this picture, you can actually see 2 of the 3 C3 areas. So this here is the area that we're talking about, and the conditions that are listed for the residential use are only those places where the property is directly across the street from a residential use. So the idea here is that if you sort of put your planning hat on, it makes a lot of sense to change uses at the rear property lines rather than at the front, and we'll look at some pictures for that as well. So then this is the second piece. This is the former Acme shopping center that we were discussing. Again, it's too close to Lancaster Avenue to be considered for the residential use under this amendment that we're asking your consideration of tonight. And the other piece that's pretty important is that the railroad runs right along here.
So we're talking about where the old pool store was?
We are. That's the property that Rockwell is concerned with primarily. That's the property that we own. We are aware, though, of course, that zoning changes don't apply to one property. So we've been really diligent to do our best to be clear about what properties this would apply to, and we can talk a little bit about the feedback that we've had from neighbors. And the feedback that we've heard is that these properties, both the pool store that we're talking about and these other properties that are highlighted in red, are not suitable for high-intensity commercial development anyway, and it's a benefit overall if they are developed under this amended zoning. So let me go to the next spot. That's a highlight of the Acme area, so that's area number 2. And then area number 3 is this one parcel.
I'm sorry, can you go back?
Sure.
So you spoke to the business owner, the pool store, and they're saying that they're happy that they're not a high-density traffic location. They don't want the business?
We own the pool store.
You own that?
Rockwell,
Okay.
Rockwell.
No, you own it, but
Correct.
you own the building.
We own the building and the lot.
Do you own the business?
Yes.
You own the business?
Yeah, the business is no longer functioning.
All right. So have you gone to all the other businesses that you don't own, that you own the property? And have you asked the business owners, the small business owners, what their take is?
Well, we did have a public meeting, and the point of this is not to take away any of the existing permitted uses.
No, but what you said is that, I mean, it just seems to me it's counterintuitive that you would have a business and you're saying, oh, well, it's good that you're not going to get a lot of traffic. That's whether you would, a business is there. I mean,
there are some businesses there
that are there. Do
Yep.
you own the building in those businesses?
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
No, we're not proposing to change the traffic patterns that are currently.
But this essentially would change traffic patterns because you're rezoning.
It would not change any of the roads. It would not change the bridge that people have to.
Not the
go
traffic number of cars, but the people and the types of people that come in and out of those streets.
All this would do would put more consumers closer to those businesses.
Not necessarily.
We're just really debating whether or not we're sending this to planning, correct? So does this seem like something, I mean, I think this is something our planning commission should look at. Is there anyone who feels like they shouldn't?
Yeah, I would like to hear from actual residents. I think this should be tabled until you actually hear from residents that live along there.
Jack, didn't you had a public meeting?
Yeah,
Well, hold on. Have you sent out letters to residents?
Yes.
So
And what was the response?
They sent out letters, actual stamped letters to residents in the whole area, and my newsletter went out to the entirety of Ward 1 who signed up for it, or I guess if you were outside of Ward 1 too and you signed up for it. We had a group that didn't quite fill up this room, but it came pretty close. We had a decent turnout, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive.
What were the negative aspects of this?
There was one question about what would happen if there were multiple sites that were developed into residences, and then you got more than just the one set of residences that we're talking about. And the answer to the question ended up being there's not really a lot of sites that are going to be affected by this. Within the C3 zoning district, there's just not a lot of buildings that are going to be qualifying for that change, as a result of which is really not that much of an issue there.
So
There's
you
no
want,
issue there.
So right now, that parallel to the backup, or in front of the train tracks, or what is what?
Show the area. Yeah, go back.
Is it a building, or is it
I'm sorry, what are you asking? I'm not sure if I understand.
You're saying, yeah.
Parcels that would be available for residential use under this zoning amendment would be these areas that are highlighted in red.
Mm-hmm.
You have the pictures too. I think Christy has some photos of that as well.
Yeah, so why don't we so this is a view sort of down the street. This is all residential use here.
Mm-hmm.
My house is just off to the right there, so definitely close by. You can see here, this is all residential as you go up Aberdeen Terrace. This is Willow, which is a small residential street, definitely small turning radius, small, sort of a sharp curve at the bottom as you get over here. And these are the areas that we're talking about right here. So this is Willow here. These are those homes that you could see in that image.
So how many businesses are there? I understand that you have the defunct pool store. I know where that is.
Yeah, so how many businesses are in there?
Yeah.
Remember you have an exhibit, I think.
It's an exhibit in the packet, but I don't have it on my slide here. So across the street, there's no businesses. That's all residential.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nick can give you in your packet,
There's a vacant business right next to the bridge there that's for lease. It used to be a shop.
Which is also non-conforming because that's in R4. It's not in the C3 that we're talking about.
If you can go
I mean,
back.
I just want to know, yeah, with the businesses, so I know that there are a lot of, you have the hardware store.
Do it best is in
And
this,
you
right?
have, and you, I know, and you have, I mean, what's their feeling on it? And you have a lot of automotive body shops too. You want to convert those businesses, if they're ever sold, into potentially residential?
I mean, potentially,
Well,
they would.
everything that's currently in C3 will be permitted, whether the property's sold or comes under new ownership or anything of that nature. This is just another option that those business owners would have, is to convert it to residential if they so desired. So we're not taking anything away from them. They keep what they have. It goes on with the land indefinitely, and that this is just another option for them. So when you think about it, they really would not be opposed to it, because it's an additional option that would only increase the value of their property as well.
The problem that I see is it's kind of a chicken or the egg. It's, well, if you build a house next to an existing business that you don't like, you have the issues of being grandfathered in, et cetera. And it could create a problem later on, 5, 10 years from now. Oh, well, we don't want to be next to we don't want to be next to an auto garage or this or that. It's too noisy. The trucks back up and make too much noise. So I think that, I don't know, I'm looking at this, that this could potentially create more problems.
The reality is that it's a mixed area right now. It is functionally mixed. There are residences next to those auto bodies, next to everything.
It's a lot like Garrett Hill, and I get it. I get it, and to start rezoning and to put another pocket of residential here or change it to commercial or go back and forth, I don't know if that's in the best interest of that neighborhood. I mean, Jack said that he had a town hall about it and had people talk about it. I would like to hear from them, not from.
We sent out written notices to everyone within 500 feet of the development, and I believe it was over 100 notices, and actually some of them were multiple. I mean, they weren't multiple notices, but one notice went to people who own multiple properties. So we did send out over 100.
And remember also, this is going to go to planning and then come back to us. So it's not like nobody will have another chance. This is not the final stop on the road.
And you'll have to send out additional letters to let people know, so people have multiple notifications. I mean.
No, I mean, to have it go to planning, if I don't think it's a good idea, then it's almost like, well, it went to planning, it was blessed by planning, it should be blessed by the Board of Commissioners, because planning said okay, and we want to do what, what our committees say, or at least we try. So I'm kind of on the fence here. I don't know.
Well, let me just see if I can understand exactly and kind of flesh this out a little bit. So basically what you're saying is it's residential and commercial today.
Correct.
And all those commercial owners can always maintain that commercial business, whatever they want. If they want to keep the auto body, and the neighbors that are there, I guess you're saying they're already there, they're used to the businesses that are there. So they're not moving. And anybody who buys and sells right now in those a lot of old houses there that have a lot of nice, like your house and that whole area there. It's a lot of historic and architecturally significant homes. So if you have a business there, you can keep your business that is going on. But as another alternative, you can change it to residential. And what you're proposing, what you're saying is, if they do change it to residential, the other neighbors would actually be happier to have it changed to residential than to have that ongoing body shop there.
Well, potentially, I think
You
the
could
thing to
use the talk to Mike.
Sure, I think the thing to realize is that there can be change in this neighborhood with or without this amendment. So the change may or may not be something that the neighborhood thinks is good. So there's the property that we're talking about is basically a big gravel trash pit right now. It's just got junk that the pool store just threw out in the yard. And that is going to be developed in some way. Should it be a use that drives a lot of cars and commercial traffic to this location? Or should it be residential? And the feedback that we got when we had the neighbor meeting was that in this particular location, they were supportive of of the residential in that particular location. It's not even, what we're not even talking about is the businesses that exist today can continue to operate because they're grandfathered. It's not that they're grandfathered, it's that they're by right uses, and that use won't change. So it could go the other way. Uses that are residential right now could turn into commercial. We're not proposing to
Well,
take away
what-
any rights as far as that's
What's the
concerned.
parking like there now, and what could this
Bad.
do? Bad. And what could this do in the worst-case scenario? What measures would this take to make parking better?
We would have, the requirement is that you have to provide your required on-site parking. So currently, as we know, the on-site parking is limited. If it is redeveloped, they would have to provide the required on-site parking. So for example, if this was converted into 4 condos, they would have to provide 8 on-site parking spaces, whereas I don't think this site has much parking right now. So they would have to comply with the parking requirement.
What would this do? I just look at this, like when you have we have our fire people there, I'm sure navigating through Little Chicago and that area is difficult, would be my guess. To me, this could create a whole, there's a set of problems now. This could create a whole other set of problems that we don't know about. So I'd be against this.
Well, what I hear them saying is that this will only make it easier if you put a new business in this location. It could drive a lot more traffic than the condos would. So my first question, though, is, so this applies to C3. Are there any other locations in C3 in any other part of the township that this applies to, or is it only in this couple of areas here in, really, what's the first ward? This is all first ward,
Right.
Jack Larkin's ward.
Right.
So he's dialed in on this, so if he's supportive, I mean, that, to me, that goes a long way. But if it's, is there any other C3 that's any other ward that this also would apply?
Right, it's only applicable, as you know, to C3, and there's only 3 C3 areas in Radnor. One, as I mentioned, was that car wash up on Conestoga and Lancaster. The second one is the old Acme site.
Wait, the car wash, that's no longer there?
No, it's still there.
Oh, the car wash at Conestoga and Lancaster.
Across from the farmer's
Up by where all
market.
those banks are being
Diagonal
built.
from the
Farmers, okay, all the way down, that one, yeah, all right.
Just that piece of property. is actually
Not the old
C3.
car wash that was down by where the crossover is by Conestoga and the Blue Route there.
Oh, no.
That changed.
Right.
All right.
And then the old Acme site, which is now the strip stores, and then this site.
So what about the car wash at Conestoga and Lancaster?
No.
Could that be converted to residential under
No,
this?
because part of the requirement is that you have to be 450 feet from an arterial, Lancaster Avenue being an arterial.
So
So
Jack-
that's why the car wash site doesn't qualify and the old Acme site does not qualify.
Just these areas right over here,
And it has
which
to
is
be
be the pool
adjacent,
store.
yeah.
And over there on the 28 and 29, what are those? Those are big, and the other, that's not Willow, is that the park right there?
This is Willow here.
Right,
This is the Cabrini Maintenance Building, currently
Okay.
commercial building.
right.
And this is a private residence. Both of these pieces are largely in the floodplain.
What about that one right there?
This here's the Pico Building.
Pico Building,
Yep.
yeah.
And then this is, I believe, Township property here.
And what's the strip below that, that right there?
This here, this has a bunch of different pieces. There's a car garage in here.
Right, there's a garage that's, yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of there's a long, sort of narrow building that's kind of vacant office. That's
kinda behind the
hardware store.
hardware store.
Exactly right. This is a mixed-use building, apartments.
There's a
and
Taylor or something over there.
Taylor, exactly
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I think a Pilates studio down as you go around the corner here. And these are the brick townhouses that are close to the train station.
All right, well, again, it looks like it's a very localized application that really is only affecting one area, and Jack, as the commissioner, has seem to have vetted it with the people. I didn't hear about that public meeting that you had, Jack. I didn't read about it in the news. Was it covered by anybody, or was it restricted?
It's not restricted. It's a public town hall meeting. It's just have to sign up for the newsletter, or you have to live in the area that you would get the messages that they send.
But
Sign up for the newsletter.
anybody could go to that?
Sure.
Even if you don't live in the township, you could go.
Sure.
There was someone that wasn't in the township here, actually.
And Nick knows this. In general, I dislike these kind of overlays that confer additional benefits to just a limited area here. But I hate to change the laws so that folks can develop, and I'm concerned that we might have a little bit of that here. But it seems like, for traffic-wise, and that area of traffic is very difficult. So you really don't want a big new business back there, I guess, because at least I think the residents would be, it would snarl up traffic, and it's very tough to get through there. Here's my issue, though, with this. This area, like you said, is floodplain. This is very low. This is part of the lowest area. Willow was the old, we go back at the old maps. This is very high water table, prone to flooding. And there's already a big development. There's new condos that were built. I don't know if it's brand new, looks nice, but they're big, modern, what do they call it? Industrial chic.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, right.
They're right on the corner of
Right.
Willow and Plant.
So my concern is overdevelopment in this very flood-prone area, and that the concern would be that we are going to make flooding worse, and that we're going to end up with flooding problems that the township will have to deal with.
Yeah, one item is, of course, we're not changing any of the floodplain requirements. And actually, as I mentioned, we are reducing the impervious coverage requirement on this site. So if you're going to redevelop this site, you're going to have to conform to the reduced impervious coverage requirement that this ordinance will provide.
Well, the impervious, that helps, but it's really the infiltration. So what will happen is developers will come and say, well, we can't perk, we need a waiver. Could we write in here that you need to have the infiltration? Or does it probably doesn't perk here?
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
The reality of that would be that you'd just be taking away development rights for properties that are just geologically impossible to infiltrate in. There are other methods for handling stormwater. And the reality of the site that we're talking about in particular tonight is that it is 100% impervious right now. It is a gravel, compacted, imported fill material. There's no water that's even controlled in any way today. So this is clearly going to be an improvement, even if we're just talking about detention or retention and water quality measures, and if there is no ability to infiltrate. We will, of course, have to follow the requirements to attempt to infiltrate, so to the extent that it's possible. And this is quite a bit higher than the slope down to the creek at the bottom of Willow. So I'm not without hope that it's possible to infiltrate here. I just don't know the answer today. But right now, this whole area, even if you look at the other sections of this C3, it's been previously developed. It's impervious now.
And I understand that. And I empathize with the point you're making. I think that what we would like to see is try to make it better, right? To try to put it back. And I don't know, I wonder if there's any way we could do some type of on-site retention. The point was the point with the stormwater is, sure, we can detain it, right? And sure, we can improve we can reduce the biological oxygen demand and to get some total suspended solids down, and it's better. Well, the issue is not the better, it's the quantity. The quantity is the flooding is what the concern is. And with the way to reduce the quantity and to reduce the flooding is to retain and to infiltrate on site. Is there any way to keep any stormwater on site that we could build in above and beyond the detainage, detain and reduce the outflows?
So can I just ask a question? Is the stormwater, the retention, does that have what is the relationship to the zoning ordinance, a change in the zoning ordinance? I'm struggling to understand that. And because we can't, all we're doing is moving this forward, or perhaps we wouldn't be able to put in a zoning ordinance any sort of
Lisa,
restriction around stormwater.
They're asking for a change in the zoning, and this is the only time where we can talk about what the township sees as important.
Won't we have a say when it comes back to us, when it's in development?
Well, the anchor will be set a little bit once it comes back to us from planning, that's true. I am the person who asked, could we do something about the stormwater management issues that's presented by this particular area? And the suggestion that came from the developer was, why don't we reduce the amount of impervious area that's currently permitted in this district as a whole, which would have the effect of radically reducing the amount of impervious cover that is on this site in particular, because the site is basically 100% impervious, whereas I think right now you can do 70% impervious in the 65, and it would go down to 60%. So it's a 5% decrease from the maximum permitted, but because the site is grandfathered right now, we would have a 40% decrease in overall change in impervious. So I was the person who asked, I kind of started that conversation, which is what leads us down this rabbit hole today, but the changes that they're making, I don't think you would know whether the site would perk or not, for the same reasons that it needs to be, it needs the reduction in impervious cover. It's entirely gravel. You can't do that test right now unless you dig up a whole bunch of stuff and get down there. So you're not going to be in a position to tell us right now whether, your goal ultimately is to develop the property. If you must infiltrate and the site doesn't perk, then you can't develop the property. You're not in a position today, I recognize, to say one way or the other whether you would agree to infiltration. But you are, I understand, also saying you will make a massive change to the amount of impervious cover that's on the site.
Well, I think it's a subtle point, but they're already going to be required to do the infiltration. They will be able to request a waiver should it not perk. My guess, and my sense of it from talking to the applicant there, is that, well, we don't know if it'll perk, but might not, and if it doesn't, we'll request a waiver. And that's the fact. And my guess is it's not going to perk very well. It's low water. It's close to the lowest portion of the township, and there's been a history of retainage and water in that area. So it's going to be high water table. It might perk in the applicant in this one location, but it probably won't in others. So then we'll be faced with waivers. So that's my concern with it, is that if you do this, we'll end up with waivers for every one of these. And I'm trying to head that off, and trying to get some kind of agreement on what we can do up front. And you're saying, well, we're going to increase the amount of green space on each site, and there'll be more grass and trees.
Rich, this is something obviously can be all vetted out during the process on the ordinance itself. We haven't really looked at it at this point, but certainly during discussions of the ordinance before Planning Commission, the public hearing, if it gets that far, before this board, and certainly discussion with this board, it can all be discussed as to.
I understood, but I think the best time is right now to talk about those things. I think that once it gets in, as we've alluded to here, there's very little chance of doing much. So that's why I wanted to talk about it at this point. And I guess the issue is that you said that there would be an increase in value to properties that had this new right to have a home. Do you have any kind of sense of what increase in value that is percentage-wise?
No. We just, when you look at it,
could be $1, it could be double,
or
or
look at it logically. If you're going to permit the current uses plus the possibility of residential uses as well, you would just think logically that would increase in value, the value of the properties. I think that's why these people are in favor of it, is they realize it's going to benefit them in the long run.
That's all I have, thanks.
Okay, is there any other commissioner comment to this? All right, do we have consensus? I guess we're just seeking consensus. We don't need a formal vote. Do we need a formal vote?
Yeah, I would make a motion to send it on to the planning
Make a
commission.
motion? Okay. All right, so I will go ahead then and make a motion to send the petition for 210 North Aberdeen Associates to amend Chapter 280 of the Radnor Township Code zoning ordinance by establishing regulations to permit certain residential uses within the C3 Service Commercial District, and sending that to the Township Planning Commission and/or other township boards, commissions, and/or committees for review and comment. May I get a second?
Second?
Okay. Is there any other comment on this? Is there any staff comment? Is there any public comment to the motion to send this to the Planning Commission?
Well, just one thing, any project that would come, if it's going to request a waiver, I'm not going to authorize for stormwater, so it'll be the same as all the other projects, so just know that up front.
Rich makes a good point. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we keep building and what's the difference of what, 5%? It's nothing. If we keep building, especially in a low-lying area, we're going to keep having flooding. And then we're going to say, well, why is that happening? We cause it.
Yeah, but it's a blighted property right now.
It doesn't matter that it's a blighted property. It will get redeveloped, but to just allow it, it's bad. It's bad business to do. It's blighted. I'm sure that if you put it up for sale and it's not selling, lower the value, it'll sell and someone will do something with it.
So you want somebody to buy the property and keep it the same and not reduce the impervious? And I'm confused. All right, well, that's fine. I don't need you to, I don't need you to explain it to me.
You asked the question. I mean, I should be allowed to answer it, right?
Yeah, it's fine. I'm just confused by you, so I don't know that your answer is going to enlighten me.
Okay. Well,
The one issue, though.
I appreciate you asking a rhetorical question that you don't want me to respond to.
We heard from the testimony, the one issue is it is going to increase the value, and it could potentially increase problems for the township. Is there any way that we can have some additional input to the township to deal with what could be additional resources that would need to be expended? If we have flooding in there, we'll have to send in the people to save people. We might have to put in barriers to say flood area, don't go in this area when it floods. We could have additional expenses that could result from this. So, it could be the case.
All right, I will call the vote. All those in favor of the motion to send this to the Planning Commission, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Nagel and Commissioner Clark absent. Okay, new business. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion regarding a joint meeting between the Board of Commissioners and the Shade Tree Commission. So I wanted to bring this forward. I guess Mr. Orsini has left. So at the last meeting of the Shade Tree Commission, of which Commissioner Booker and I are the representatives on, we discussed having a collaborative meeting to talk about the issues of trees in the right-of-way. I'm sorry. Am I interrupting?
We were just talking about the ramifications of that last approval, and so we're just going through final points, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It's in.
Well, we are moving on because it is 9:35. All right, so we talked about the Shade Tree Commission, a joint meeting between the BOC and the Shade Tree to help tackle the issue of the trees in the right-of-way. That's something that we've been talking about, and I don't think that we as a board have come to any consensus that I don't even know that we have all the information. And the Shade Tree Committee, there are people on that board, Matt Golis and some of the other representatives who, they live, eat, and breathe this. They know. And I think that they might have some helpful and useful suggestions as we try to tackle this issue, which we've been told is anywhere from $1 million to $3 million of maintenance per year to catch up with the maintenance that hasn't been done for 20 some odd years. So I wanted to bring that forward. I had suggested it at the meeting. The Shade Tree Commission seemed amenable to it, and before anything would happen or move forward, I wanted to bring it to my board colleagues and see how you all feel about that. I mean, I know ultimately this decision will be ours, but I think that the more information we have from the folks that are, really engaged and involved in this is helpful.
Just a quick question. Are we, and I don't know the procedure here, this would be the 7 of us, hopefully?
Yeah, I was thinking it would be the
Okay,
7 and the shade
Are
tree.
we allowed to, it's not an issue of quorum, or we're allowed to meet at 7? I just want
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah, just
Cool.
like we do like a finance
It's an
committee meeting.
advertised meeting. It'd be an
I
advertised
just want to
meeting.
make sure that there's, because we ran into the problem with the, what do you call it, with that goal seeking, and I just want to make sure that it's cool. That's it. Did you say yes? Okay.
We aren't going to meet in an executive session. It would be a public meeting with the shade tree and us.
Well, some time ago, I had talked about this issue, and I specifically proposed an exemption, discussion of an exemption from the shade tree ordinance for trees in the right-of-way paid for by the homeowner. And one of the things I said, Bob, can you come back with some suggestions? So I don't know, because the people were largely the people who showed up at that meeting were largely opposed to my discussion item. So and this was, I think, in March or April of 2018. So it's more than a year ago. But was there anything that you came up with in how to address it, other than we just man up and start, hiring guys to remove trees in the right-of-way? Is there any other way that you've thought about that would be worth considering now before we even talk to these guys?
I think the issue that we had raised is, how the trees are taken down, with the arborist being able to certify that the tree is a hazard that has to be removed. The issue is there's a lot of maintenance that has to be done to the trees that we have not been able to get around to. We have no crew to be able to do that. So the issue that was raised was either we hire staff to have our own tree crew to be able to maintain these. Do we turn the trees over, as most other communities have, where the homeowner is responsible for those? Or do we just commit funding and manage the trees that we're woefully years behind? So, and then replanting, that's a big part of it. Do we want to replant all these trees, which I think there's a feeling from the board that we want to be able to replant a lot of these trees too.
So in essence, basically, my proposal's really been implemented, right? So if you have a tree in the right-of-way today, you can call and say that this is a hazard, and if a hazardous tree, it can be removed, and it would not have to meet the requirements of the shade tree ordinance, which is limited to certain sizes and numbers and things.
That would be correct.
So this would be over and above that. This is how to.
Right.
And it's an important issue in my area that we have trees and branches that take out the power lines, and it's really a problem, and it does present a danger to the health, safety, and general welfare of some constituents. And I've had instances where we have people in their 80s and 90s that are in the house just waiting for the power to come on for a couple. We had in March of 2018 for several days, and it's dangerous in that situation in the cold. So I understand the point, but I guess I don't have an objection to it. But what are the goals that you would outline to try to achieve in the meeting, Lisa?
Well, I think the first thing, I feel like we hear a lot of information about the condition of trees, the rights of, the trees in the rights of way. Again, Matt Golis, and we've supported him and, in his project, I think he's got a lot of useful information that can help us decide how we want to go with this and what we want to do. And I think that the Shade Tree, the members of Shade Tree, again, are uniquely qualified. They look at these issues. They deal with it daily. Whether it's developers or it's hazardous trees that have been taken down or trees that need to be taken down. They deal with it on a regular basis. And I think, I don't know how anyone else feels, but I feel like we could benefit from their expertise and their input. And again, they are residents, and any decision we make will impact them. So
if I can just add to that, Lisa, from that meeting, is they had made a presentation last year to the board at the budget of what they felt was necessary and needed, which I believe was about $1 million a year, which they had proposed, which they had gone through and put a lot of time into that proposal. So as part of that, I think would be, again, their discussion directly with the board, but then also establishing those policies to, you know, in heavily wooded areas that the township property owns, do we remove those trees or we just let them fall naturally? A lot of these different areas where you can have policy and guidelines for them to follow as they look at applications and look at tree removals. But there are a lot of trees I think we can save in the township if the proper maintenance was pruning to them. You know, deep root feeding, a lot of that. And again, I think, Lisa, to your point, is Matt Golis has done a tremendous job of identifying all the street trees and which ones need to come down, replacements, which ones are good. So I think we want to try to save as many as those can. So I think this conversation would be very good from both boards to be able to get a good feel from each other on this, of how to proceed.
Two questions. One, could we invite PICO? I don't know if that would be a help, or any of the entities that. I think that we should invite PICO as well to this, because they're a big stakeholder when it comes to the trees. But the $1 million question, so to speak, is where are we going to pay for this? So it's great to have this conversation, but we don't, I mean, I was looking at the budget earlier tonight, and it just seems like tons and tons of shortfalls. So to come up with a plan and to spin our wheels and the resources of the township without having a real legitimate way to fund it, because this will be in the tens of millions by the time we're done.
But if we have a plan and we start to, you know, we agree on a direction, then, I mean, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. I mean, it's definitely something we would have to plan for, you know, maybe incrementally. We do things and we say this is 20 years. It took us 20 years, Bob, 20-some years to get to this point. It's not going to be solved overnight, but we need to do something. I keep hearing we need to do something.
And I think it's unfortunate that it's fallen into your lap now.
Sure.
Where you've got to decide one way or the other, because just regular maintenance, tree maintenance, so that you don't have limbs hanging in the way. So when the plow trucks go by and their mirrors are getting clipped with those or they're coming down, you've got a lot of branches that need to be pruned from a lot of these trees that right now are our responsibility. The other question comes up, the sidewalks that are being broken up by a lot of these trees. It falls on, unfortunately, your lap because for not doing a whole lot for such a long period. And I think it's a point where, is everybody looking for saying the board needs to invest $2 million starting tomorrow? The issue is if there's a plan of how you're going to start addressing these.
Bob, could you reach out to PICO and invite them, Lisa?
We could invite them. You've seen the way they've pruned trees here in the township.
And I think it's important that they come and realize that there are cause for some of this.
But we'll invite John Hosbeck too, because also too, with a lot of the replanting of trees, we have to be very aware of power lines, what can be planted underneath those, and that's something that we're real cognizant of now in replanting of trees.
Yeah,
So it's a lot of that policy decision.
Yeah, no, if we're going to do this, invite all the stakeholders. So you have the board, you have Shade Tree, you have PICO, because, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you have someone from, who do we use to cut the trees?
We have Horrigan to do that. We have a lot of tree companies in the township that are very good.
I'd like to hear what they have to say too. So I just don't want to, so if you put all the stakeholders together, then you can kind of figure out what the best course of action.
What we can do is invite all 16 companies, different companies that
you
are
don't
on.
need 16,
No,
but-
I just think, Sean, from everybody who's on the wires, all the wires on the poles,
Yeah,
there's 16 different vendors, because there's policies from some of the cable companies that says we don't trim trees.
So-
We won't
That's
do
why
that.
we have this policy.
Sure, I agree.
I think that certainly it's appropriate to have the, you know, the vendors that deal in the township and PICO involved, but I feel like, could we at least just have one meeting with us and Shade Tree, the people who are the real stakeholders in this, the people who will end up paying for this, and the people who need to make, you know, who need to make the decision. PICO isn't going to make the decision. PICO is going to come in and cut down trees however they cut down trees. You know, we can try to influence that as much as we want. Shade Tree can certainly tell them what they want. We've got, you know, arborists on the Shade Tree Commission, but PICO's going to do what they're going to do. And I'd rather not engage them in this process because they're not stakeholders in this. They're not stakeholders. We're the stakeholders. And Shade Tree is the stakeholders. The residents of the township are the stakeholders. PICO is not a stakeholder.
I disagree on that.
Well, we might have to agree to disagree. And then we can bring them in later, but I'd like to at least have one meeting
That's
where
fine,
it's
but
just the
I think
stakeholders.
that we need to talk to the other stakeholders as well, but that's fine.
And PICO does a lot of tree trimming, and so it's their wires, their stakeholders, and they are part of the process.
Okay. All right, so is there consensus that we could go ahead and move forward with this?
Yes.
Jake? Okay. All right. Thank you. So you will schedule that, we'll work on scheduling that, and we'll work with Shade Tree on that. New business. Discussion item of proposal for a fire department initiative, Commissioner Abel.
Yep, this is in response to feedback we've received from the fire departments that they are having, that there are concerns with being able to attract volunteers in the years ahead. I've had conversations with Villanova University, and they are willing to come to the table to have a conversation about partnering with the township to create a scholarship for a student to volunteer at one of our fire departments. I see this as a four-step process. One is hold the conversation with Villanova. Two, get commitment from this board that we would match the fund, and we're talking $2,500 or probably at max $5,000 for the scholarship. Once if this board agrees to move forward, then we would ask the township to meet with the fire departments and the university to discuss parameters. A student with no training or background isn't going to be of use to the fire department. So, the criteria at the least, at the minimum, they're going to have certain training to be able to support and be of benefit to the fire departments. And I see this really as a test case. If this is a success, we may be able to replicate this with Eastern, with Cabrini, with other universities or institutions in the township. So I guess what I'm asking for is their agreement that this board would support as a line item, $2,500, $5,000 at max for a scholarship, so we can get some volunteers, hopefully attract some volunteers to support our fire departments.
So the proposal is that it would be basically maybe as much as a $10,000 scholarship for a Villanova student. That would be a requirement that they be a volunteer fireman while they're in school?
For that, I mean, I would let the parties iron out the details, but what I would be looking at is, if we dedicate $2,500, the university dedicates $2,500. That's a $5,000 scholarship for that year for a student to be a volunteer to the fire departments.
So you're going to have to deal, and this is a 1-year scholarship, or it goes on for 4 years? What is this?
Well, this would be a 1 year, but if a student is a sophomore and they have the credentials and they want to come back and volunteer for a second year, we're giving that student, we're helping open doors for possible future work.
Sure. So I see what you're trying to do, but to me it just seems that we're, giving them the. I mean, maybe if they had some experience, they did fire from high school or something, that would work. But if we're just gonna, I don't know. I'd rather give $2,500 of our money to the fire department. So if you're giving $100,000 this year, but you give $102,500, and they decide to do what's best, to have them train somebody who is probably going to leave in 2 years or 1 year. I just don't see that as a good use of their resources, their time, or our tax dollars. So I want to fund the fire department, but I would rather see that money go directly to them and not to work with some kind of deal where we have to see if it's working out or essentially babysit, and I'd be against it.
Well, the criteria, and I would let the fire department speak, they would want somebody who has the training, who you don't have to bring in to provide the entry-level training. They're ready to go. They're supporting, they're helping out.
Sure, I'd rather see the fire department give $2,500 to one of their existing, maybe volunteers to have them do more time or put them on the books part-time or something along those lines, as opposed to trying to bring somebody in who's only going to be here temporarily. I'd rather see, I got a bunch of kids I know that that live in Wayne, that live close to the fire department, and they want to run calls and they want to do stuff. I'd rather see you give that money to them, and I don't know, I don't know if you pay them $25 an hour. It's 100. That's 100 man hours that you don't have to pay someone, as opposed to try to work with them and teach them. It's a fire department, it's not a school, and I don't want our tax dollars to go to someone that's where we're trying to teach them on the job, and then they're going to leave in a year or two.
I think firefighters and police officers, I think they get teaching on the job every day. I mean, they're learning new experiences. That's what they do. They learn on the job.
Yeah, my wife was a volunteer firefighter in high school, and she was trained in the course of being a volunteer firefighter in high school. I think she provided valuable services. Certainly, they asked her to come back, and she did. But we're, I suspect, about to hear from the fire department, and they'll tell us whether
and I'm
the thing
sure,
is
but these
worthwhile.
Villanova students probably aren't going to stick around for, they're going to get a job and move on, and it's just, we'll train you for a year or two, and I know that some of you've been in the fire department for practically your whole life. And again, I would rather see that $2,500 directed toward paying maybe a volunteer as a real small part-time job, or do something other than trying to partner to just move someone in where it's kind of like a co-op. Well, you'll learn this, you'll learn that, and then you move on and we hire or we give somebody else a scholarship.
That's what volunteers do. There's nothing to say if they paid somebody a stipend
But
to work
I don't see them sticking around for the long term.
But you can't ensure that anyone that they bring on as a volunteer sticks around for the long term.
A college student that goes to Villanova or Eastern, most likely once they get a job, if they stick around, that's great. If they don't and they move on, I personally think that the best use of our money would be to go pay somebody that is currently in the fire department right now, and to pay them for 100 hours that we know that they're going to use. I trust Eamon, I trust you guys to find who those people are that are going to stick around, whose hearts are in it, and they're not doing it to get a $5,000 scholarship because from their school. And I know who those, and I know who those people are. And I would rather see you pay them because they're going to stick around, not for a year, but for 10, 20, 30 years. That's my opinion.
Eamon, do you have something you want to, please?
Good evening, everyone. Well, thank you to Commissioner Abel for bringing this up. Obviously, anything that the community can do to encourage people to volunteer at any of the three fire companies that serve the township, Radnor, Bryn Mawr, and Broomall, is a good thing. I think right off the top, I guess if this was going to get crafted, whether it's at Villanova or Eastern Cabrini or Valley Forge Military Academy, we would look at it as we would want to have people to have most of their core training. So their firefighter one, their EMT, hazmat training, and really for us it would just be getting them into the firehouse, orienting them to our apparatus, orienting them to our SOGs and how we operate, and they would go to our weekly drills just like we do with the rest of our volunteers. I guess the dollar amount, I don't know if that's high enough, because I know Villanova's, it's a good, it's a good institution, but it's, pretty expensive to go there. So maybe that needs to be looked at. I would say maybe try to do all the schools at one time as a collaborative. I know in talking to Manager Zakowski and Commissioner Booker in particular about Villanova and just the schools contributing more, towards fire EMS. Maybe this is a way to kind of kickstart that and get that going. I personally like to see more than just one offered. There should be a few, because we might have folks that are more EMS oriented. We would be directing them to Radnor. On the fire side, they can make a choice if they wanted to go down to Bryn Mawr or run at Radnor. Kind of just depends on what they want to do. So really, there aren't any necessarily bad ideas with this. I mean, as was pointed out, we get volunteers even from the community that come in. We could lose them in a year or 2 years because they have kids, they get relocated, or they simply just lose interest, or they get in there and realize, do I really want to do 200 hours of Firefighter 1 training and go to 25% of the drills and do annual CPR or hazmat training and other types of things. So I think, the chief's office and our administrative folks are open to sit with the commissioners, sit with the staff, sit with our fellow fire providers in the township and come up with some solutions around volunteerism. The scholarship idea is good, I think, in getting the colleges a little more engaged with what's going on with fire EMS. But I think increase that number a little bit as far as the dollar amount and trying to increase the spots that are available, I think is something that we're open to talking about.
Question, so if we gave you a check for $2,500, what would be the first thing that you would do? Would it be to come up with a scholarship with the yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking that,
I mean, you can do a lot of things. I mean,
you could do a lot of things, but this is,
we could, I mean,
and
we could do a stipend program for existing members.
That's all I'm saying. My personal belief is that some of the universities use your facilities, our facilities, time and time and time and time again. So for them only to pony up $5,000 or $2,500, I think it's not enough. Why not? Why can't they have a full scholarship? I mean, why do we as a Board of Commissioners and a township have to pony up money for entities that can well afford it and have huge bank accounts that could easily pay for this?
I would just say, I mean, we try to be creative with how we fund things, and I think in the spirit of public-private partnerships, I like this idea. As you know, with our funding, the township, in particular, Radnor's increased funding considerably, and that's been a huge help to us on the operating side, so we're not draining our reserves down. So I look at this as, the township does a little bit, maybe we want the universities to do a little bit more than the township, and we're all working together towards the common goal and making sure the service is provided and making sure that we're maintaining a good volunteer base to respond when we're needed.
I think that the $2,500, if you pay someone $25 an hour to run calls, would be a better use. God forbid you have a fire, or would you rather the $2,500 that we're spending? If we could either give it to you and say $2,500, do what you want with it, or we want to train someone who may or may not be here in a year. I would rather give you the $2,500 and you decide the best use of it. I get the idea of a partnership, but I think, and it looks good, it sounds great on paper, I get the spirit of it, I think it's wonderful. But at the end of the day, I think that it's just a good idea that you're throwing money at. Again, it's let's pat ourselves on the back and on the shoulder saying, hey, we're doing something, but it's just not, the money is, it's like I said, it's not the best use. I would rather give it to you and you decide how you want to spend it.
So I guess I just have a concern, and having two kids in college right now, one of the I think the hardest things for kids is when they receive a scholarship, or they receive receive scholarship funds, and to only get that one time, that's why. And I think, Sean, you asked the question, would it be something that is for all 4 years? Usually that's what a scholarship is. I think that just to give it one time, I mean, then how does that kid make that money up later? I'm just concerned about that. And then, if it's a commitment the township makes, then we're committed to it, year after year. And to Sean's point, is that, are we taking money away then from something that, would it be better spent giving it to you guys? Like and I'm looking at some of the things we have here that Bill detailed in some of our minutes. So a 20% real estate tax credit for volunteers. So I'm looking here, it says a draft ordinance is ready. So for us to do something like that. But again, would it be better to give you the $2,500 and you guys, I know you've rented an apartment and you give it to volunteers at a low cost. Would it be better to do something like that? And then that the person is there, that, your money is being well spent. Yeah, they could leave, but then you would at least backfill, bring somebody else in and do something like that.
If you were going to give us the amount of money, we could, put that into our, as we call it, our housing program. We've looked at, possibly expanding that to an additional apartment close to the station. So we talk about turnout time for dispatch of wheels moving out the door. So it's, we want those folks close. The other thing I know, I think it's detailed in the packet that Finance Director White put together. The stipend program, I think, was in there or mentioned about, that kind of being more of our thing. But at the township, we're putting money out for something like a stipend program. We could develop the parameters around that. Again, going back to Commissioner Farley's point, maybe that's the $2,500 or $5,000. And the Chief McGuire's here this evening, and our safety officer and past Chief Doug Felsky. We've talked about some of these things with the stipend program, and there's pros and cons to that as well. But yeah, we could beat this up all night. But I appreciate you all bringing it up. If you want to, I can talk offline with Commissioner Abel and we get this with the staff and come back with something a little more concrete. Maybe it's still the scholarship, or maybe we're focused more on maybe stipend program or doing something to expand the housing program. Does that make sense? Not to cut this off, but I know you have a lot going on.
I think the housing is good. I think housing is better.
Madam President, if I may, just to add to Eamon's point, anything that is done to help the volunteers in the fire company is beneficial, because throughout the Commonwealth, volunteer firefighters are falling off and departments are going to full-time. So if you look at one full-time firefighter to go on, you're talking in excess of $100,000 to be able to do that. And I'm sure it's more with turnout gear and all of that. The reality of it is our neighbors are adding more and more full-time firefighters. If we can work through incentive programs any way that we can, we'll benefit in maintaining that volunteer force, because it's happening throughout the entire Commonwealth. Most states go to full-time firefighters and paramedics and medics. That day is coming here, and trying to prolong that as long as we can. Any incentives that can be offered is huge across that line. So anything that can be offered, the creativity is much less expensive than what it would cost for full-time medics or firefighters.
So then so it says a draft ordinance is ready. So can we at least get started on the 20% real estate tax credit?
We can do that. We can
So we could
actually
have that
get
for the
get
next
that.
meeting?
We can do that. Yes, we can.
Okay.
Well, we had a willing partner here, and not moving forward, there's no guarantee that that partner's going to be there in the future. This would have been a good test case to see if we could attract people to support the fire departments and get volunteers in when you're telling us that you guys aren't attracting volunteers anymore. So let's keep doing the same stuff we're doing, and not helping the fire department, and and meanwhile not respond to institutions that are willing to support us on this.
Jake, which institution is that, Villanova? I'm just
What's that?
asking, which institution?
Well, the Government Relations Office is willing to have the conversation with staff if there's a commitment that we're willing to support.
I think we're still going to try to do that, right? I'm not saying we're right. Did I miss something? We're still going to have that conversation.
Yeah,
at
you
least?
can have that conversation and bring it forward. So, and I was being told by our solicitor that, we aren't really voting on anything. We don't have anything to vote on. So, we would need a resolution.
Yeah.
We would need something. So, but I say, if we've got a draft ordinance for a 20% real estate tax credit, put it on our next agenda so that we can vote on that. That to me is an incentive program. I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah,
It
we
says-
don't need a resolution to have a consensus that we'd support $2,500 or $5,000 and give direction to Bob and the township to meet with Villanova and the fire departments to craft criteria and see if there's agreement. Like, there's no resolution needed for that. Just give the go-ahead and let's try to get some volunteers to the fire departments.
I think Jake's point is the issue is getting a person, a body, to the fire department. And Eamon said, and I kind of think, even if we do 5,000, the university is, so it's 10,000, it's kind of, it might not be enough for, for a Villanova student, but the concept is a Villanova student, we have a scholarship, and that's what comes with that scholarship is he participates, and we have a new person in the fire department, and we're addressing the issue of a lack of people and doing it in a creative way. So I understand that, and but by the same token, if we can attract somebody by increasing the housing program or increasing something else, it might result in the same benefit through a different means. So I don't think anybody's trying to preclude any of
Why
it.
wouldn't you want 2 volunteers?
Yeah, let me put the question to you maybe directly.
Well, is it enough with 2,500 or 5,000? That's my question.
Unless you do a test case, you don't know.
For 1 year, I mean, students, if students accept a scholarship, like, for 1 year, it's not going to help them.
Eamon-
It's not going to help them. It's, then
I got
it's
scholarships
gone the
for 1
next
year.
year?
I got
But then it's
scholarships for
gone the
1 year.
next year?
Yeah, Eamon, what I
Do
would.
we sustain that in perpetuity for 4
Yeah,
years?
no.
That's,
What I would rather see is that you take people that are in your firehouse now, and if they go to one of those schools, then we could match 2,500. But to pull someone that's going to Villanova now, we don't know if they're committed to staying here in Radnor or Broomall or Bryn Mawr. But if you have someone that, and again, I mean, I know a couple people that really want to succeed in life, and they're go-getters, and they wind up taking college classes, that could help them. I would rather see it go directly to the fire department as opposed to a Villanova college kid. If, first and foremost, they're a firefighter, and then when they get their education, we could help subsidize that. That's how, as opposed to the opposite.
So let me ask the question to you, I guess, directly. It sounds like you have 2 options. The first is you can get $5,000, $2,500 of which comes from the township and $2,500 of which comes from Villanova, but it's only for the limited purpose of offering a scholarship, which hopefully has the effect of bringing somebody in who meets your criteria. The other option is you get $2,500 from the township, free and clear, do whatever you want with it. Obviously, you get other money from the township. It's not like that's the only cash that you get from us one way or the other, but as between the 2 options, do you have a preference?
I mean, it's kind
putting Eamon on the spot. That's not nice. That's not nice. Yeah, we shouldn't be arguing about this. I mean, really.
Because you can argue it both ways. I mean, yeah, we have 2 folks in the housing program. I mean, we could put in that. I mean, the advantage. One thing I didn't point out. Well, you mentioned the criteria. If we can get additional Villanova, Cabrini, or Eastern students that have all their training that come in, that saves time internally with our volunteers who are orienting, getting people up to speed, and then sending them off to fire school. So those are the best volunteers you get when people come in and they have all their core training. It's very easy for us to get those people going and immediately being impactful. You know, the advantage, and it's advantage and a disadvantage at the same time from a time element, but with Radnor Fire Company, specifically in Bryn Mawr, we have so many schools right here. We need to take, I think, more advantage of partnering with the schools on things because the kids are there. I'm telling you, we've had a lot of kids who are like, I'd come down, I'm not sure, I don't have a car or whatever. And we're like, no, just, we can give you a ride down to the firehouse. But we're trying to do more at the schools because I feel is an untapped resource in a lot of respects. But again, we're only going to have them for usually 2 to 3 years, and then they move on. We have had folks that have stayed in the area. Right now, we've had a pretty good influx of Villanova students. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be hedging here, but I mean, I could, if you tell us, like, you're giving us $2,500, we're going to work the chief's office, the admin folks, and we're going to put it towards what Commissioner Abel's talking about. We're going to make that work. If we're going to put it towards additional housing, we're going to make that work too. That's really what I can tell you. Sorry. That's the answer.
But I think to your point, you wouldn't take somebody, the criteria would be set, you wouldn't give a scholarship to somebody who had no training.
Correct.
Like you would
Yes.
make sure they had, whatever you guys said is, this is the criteria you need to have to compete and to put in for the scholarship.
Yes.
Maybe that's the solution then. There's $2,500 that the township is willing to put up. Villanova is willing to put up another $2,500, and in the process advertise the scholarship and try and get students involved. If ultimately no one shows up who meets your criteria, the $2,500 goes to the fire company, and everybody who's unhappy with giving the money to the scholarship fund ends up getting it to the fire company instead. If somebody shows up who you want, then great, you've made the conscious decision, you'd rather have that person than the $2,500, and you get them.
I want to support the fire company, however, so it's immaterial, as long as you guys are getting the money and you get a volunteer. I mean, I would say maybe you offer them, Villanova students, cheap housing as opposed to a scholarship, instead of having to pay however much is you have to pay to live in the dorms, or, and you rent a place and they live there. I don't know, but.
Again, I would say look at the promote from within, where you could partner with the universities around here and the colleges around here and say, we're going to give a scholarship because these people are firefighters. And those are the people I would think that universities would want. Again, if it's Villanova or Cabrini or whatever, I don't want someone coming from Connecticut whose chances are they're not going to stay. You have certain crops of people where you can really focus on them and almost kind of promote from within.
So if your house is on fire, are you going to check their IDs to see where they're from?
Jake, that's ridiculous.
Okay, all right. I think we need to wrap this up. We've made Eamon, I think we need to wrap this up. We've made Eamon stand there long enough. So do we at least have consensus to let Eamon and, collaborate with the staff, I guess, and look at additional ways, in addition to this ordinance, which I think we should definitely have on our next agenda, say it one more time, for the real estate tax credit for volunteers. And then, whatever else, you guys can dream up that you think would be most effective in order to recruit volunteers around $2,500, be it a scholarship with Villanova or housing. Is there anyone? It is a small amount. Yeah, what is Villanova's tuition? $71,000, I think.
It's
I'm not
such
sure.
a small ask that it's insulting. I personally feel that it's insulting to say what Jack said. Well, if you don't find anyone, we give you the $2,500, and the universities get to pull their money back. I think that if there's no scholarship, fine. The university should still have to pony that money up to you, because most of those universities don't pay a pilot, and it's important that your stakeholders to them when it comes to EMT, you have your ambulance at the football games, that it's time that they pony up for some of this, even if it is only $2,500. But it is the ask is so low, it's insulting, and if we are setting the bar and our eyes so low on asking Villanova to pony up $2,500 for all that you guys do, there's a big, big disconnect here.
All right, so we'll have the ordinance for the volunteers, for the tax credits. And then, I think without anything specific to vote on, we really can't, but you guys can continue to work on, initiatives that will continue to.
And I'm supportive of trying to find a way to do a scholarship. I mean, all of the above, right?
I think we're saying all of the above, so, continue to.
Details just need to be worked out, whatever
Yeah,
they are.
details.
However it's going to work.
Yeah.
And then that can come back to the board.
Yeah, and whatever you think is going to work best for you guys. And in recruiting people. So,
right,
all
thank you.
right. Thank you, Eamon. Okay, is there any additional new business? Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Farhi.
Yeah. So speaking of pilots, I'd like to turn this over to Bob Z. and Chief Flanagan. There was a bust at Flippin' Bailey's. 100, 200 people were arrested. I know that I sent Chief Flanagan an email today asking basically how much stings like this cost. Is it a detraction? I know that's what the police are there to do, but is it a detraction from other things that they could be doing? My other question was, are the fines, Chief Flanagan, they said they range from $300 to $1,000. How much does the town, depending on what happens, how much does the township see out of this? Because again, with our fire and our EMT, some of these universities, specifically to mention by name Villanova, they do drain the township resources. This is case in point. And Bob, I don't know if a pilot is something that should be revisited, or Chief, if you could, Flanagan, if you could talk to some of these points about how many man hours, 18 hours worked overtime on this, what the costs are associated with this.
We ran an operation outside of Flippin' Bailey's from approximately 2000 hours or 8 p.m. to about 2:30 in the morning. We're working on we'll have the numbers for you tomorrow, Commissioner. I know you'd asked for that. We're just waiting for one more calculation from Mr. White. There were two, I would like to just clarify one thing. There was approximately 200 citations will be issued, non-traffic summary offenses for underage drinking. And we are working with the District Attorney's Office on some arrests for 2 to 3 of the individuals. It's an open case. I don't think I should get into any details on the public, but those general facts are there. It did not affect the safety of the citizens. Our entire patrol division was intact. These were officers brought in to assist due to obviously the sheer numbers that I just went over.
Do you think it's time, I mean, I'll talk to you, I spoke to you, Bob, about the reasons why we need a pilot.
Right, we've had that discussion probably for 7, 8 years on that. I think if there's an agreement of the entire board that this is something there should be discussions on, whether it's a pilot or some other way to offset expenses to police and fire would be something that would be a good dialogue to have with them. So I would be supportive of that.
I guess my major concerns are, or questions, is that if this comes specifically from one college, and I know, I don't think you asked what school you went to, but if it costs a township, I don't know, say $100,000, I'm just throwing and 90% of the students were from Villanova, that Villanova should have to bear some of the costs on this. I mean, this is a Ward 7 issue. It's a Garrett Hill issue. It's noise. It's people lining up. You have underage people getting in, and if you're going to drink underage, you could be driving underage. It's a health issue, and it's an externality caused by the university. And when you reached out to the university, or did you? Was there any response?
The police did not reach out to Villanova. We did not survey what school or what location people were from. We were focused on whether they were in violation of the underage drinking laws, 6308 of the Crimes Code. So that was our primary focus. We're going to break down the information and locations, but we did not contact the university at all in regards to this.
Are you going to contact the university? Do you have plans to?
In my opinion, our role of the police department is we were notified of a possible violation of the Commonwealth law. We responded regardless of who they were, whether they were locals, college students, visitors, whatever. We've handled that. I've kept the township manager apprised of everything that's going on. We'd like to get through the paperwork, Commissioner. I think it's going to take us up through Wednesday, Thursday, if everything goes right, to get everything accomplished. I'll give him a final report on that, and then we can go from there.
Okay, it just seems that 200+ citations is definitely a reason, in my opinion, of a phone call to any institution where their students are. So, and how do we prevent this stuff going forward? Underage drinking. It's an issue in my ward. It's an issue in Garrett Hill. The house is in Garrett Hill. They're close to the bars. It's upsetting to the neighbors, and it should be upsetting to the whole township that this is one of the reasons why we have a shortfall. Because right here in your email, like you said, there was 114 work hours and then overtime hours as well. And it's the township. We foot the bill for that, and that to me is truly upsetting, and that's why I would like, and I'd ask the board to at least come up with some kind of proposal to approach some of these universities for a pilot.
Commissioner, I do agree. The underage drinking is an issue, and it's something that's important, whether it's a small community or a community our size or a big city. So we do plan, once we're done our initial paperwork review with the manager, is to do some type of public service announcement, just letting everybody know about the dangers of underage drinking, and also it is a violation of the Commonwealth's law, and what the consequences are if you are found guilty, and it is a serious matter, whether it's in somebody's private home, a bar, or in a campsite, whatever it may be. It's still a violation, and we want to keep our young people safe. So I do agree with you. We'd like to take this opportunity to get that PSA out to our community, young and old.
Okay.
Also, if I can just add to Chris's point, the other thing we encourage people and our residents, that if there is an issue at a residential property or any facility within the township, is to dial 911 right away. Because what I know some of Chris's frustrations are, we don't get those calls or emails until a day later or two later, and they need to be able to respond right now so they know exactly what's going on, what's taking place. It's just a quick call to that. So not only is the public education part of that, but also, too, if there are violations, you have to dial 911 so they can respond immediately to that.
And I get that. But the real issue for me is that this behavior doesn't stop until you come down hard on the institution that allowed this. In this case, you may have had issues internally at the bar. But where are all these students coming from? And they can hand out pamphlets and have barbecues, but at the end of the day, you have 200-plus citations. And I would hope, and I would ask this board, and I would ask you, Bob or John, to look into a pilot, look into reaching out to them. I mean, we should not have to pay for this. Our police should not have to pay for this. It's draining resources from our tax dollars. It's draining resources from the police and from the fire.
Sean,
So-
I think just for that is there's got to be a consensus of the board that this
Well,
is the direction to go, because
Lisa?
in the past, we've had those dialogues with the universities, and pretty much they knew that they were sitting with us, and they were like, well, we've already talked to commissioners,
Yeah.
and they're not in favor of it. So if there's a consensus of the board, we should have that discussion. We've got multiple proposals that we had submitted. But the
I mean,
problem is if there's not a
if
consensus of the board.
If not now, when? And this behavior will keep on happening, and we'll keep having to pay the bill and foot the bill for this, and the taxpayers will do that.
But we've also done joint operations with Lower Marion too as well at certain times that we have
Yeah,
done
no,
that. So there's been a lot of cooperation on that issue, so.
I just care that we're paying for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, and I would hope that there's consensus to that, because we're paying for this.
So-
At least have John and Bob look into it, look into a pilot. I don't care if it's $1, they should be on the books, and it should be something. It's important. It's our tax dollars, and it's a detriment to the Garrett Hill community. Or any community.
Okay, is there a consensus to have the staff investigate a pilot with the universities? I'm not opposed to it. I don't think we can hold the universities responsible for the actions of students off campus. Getting into an underage bar, I mean, I'm going to have to say that's on the bar who was letting kids in underage. So
Well,
But I'm not opposed to, investigating and the idea of a pilot with our universities.
I'm not opposed to asking the question. I think that everybody knows what the answer is
Yeah.
going to be. It's kind of going to be a waste of your time. Villanova has said repeatedly that it's willing to offer the township in-kind services, that it's willing to work with us on a lot of different projects. Apparently, they're talking about matching scholarship funds if the township kicks in order to fund the fire department. I know they've offered to help with stormwater matters in terms of lobbying in Harrisburg to get us grant funds. And a lot of that doesn't get taken advantage of. So, yeah, if you want my permission, then yes, go and ask them for a pilot. Why not? But also, let's have more of a realistic conversation about how can we take advantage of some of the offers that they have made in the past that largely end up languishing on the vine.
I mean, if you're saying that all they're giving us is $2,500 and the cost of this, it's their students, they have the whole good neighbor guide, they go around preaching, be a good neighbor, yet their kids are going in, no, let me finish, and then that'll be it, are going into bars underage, we're footing the bill. So we can have a,
Sean, the bars are letting them in.
the students shouldn't be going in either.
If it were up to me, Villanova would make up our budget gap every single year.
No, I don't
I
expect
just-
that. I don't expect that, but I just would like to see, I would like to see something.
But they're offering real things that we can take advantage of.
$2,500 doesn't make a dent.
They're also offering.
It
that
doesn't
they're
make a
gonna-
dent into what that bill is, and
Yeah,
I
but let me
can't wait to
finish. They're
see, I
offering
can't wait to
many
see the
other
bill from
things.
Chris Flanagan.
They're offering many other things. They're
Like what?
offering lobbying in Harrisburg. They have many times, and we as a
We,
board
we
actually
should, we
asked
should
them to
not
do
be, we
that.
should not be using their lobbyists, okay? That is
I
a
can't
conflict
see a
of
rea-
interest.
No, it is not.
It's a huge conflict of
not
interest
a
using
conflict
their
of interest
lobbyists.
at
It
all.
They're
absolutely-
lobbying on our behalf.
Yeah, but we don't know, yeah, we're lobbying, they're lobbying on our behalf, but they're gonna want something out of it, as they usually do. So, no, it's a conflict of interest.
they've
We
asked
should
for-
have our own lobbyists, or we shouldn't
I'm
be
all for
lobbying
that,
for
too.
something.
Absolutely.
We'll take that.
So, but we shouldn't be using their lobbyists.
Yeah, I just-
Anyway, all right, if you
They
could
have
just,
made offers, and if we are going to get serious about trying to ask Villanova to step up and participate more financially, let's at least start by taking advantage of what's on the table, and then we can continue pressing for a pilot. Why not?
I would rather, again, it's inefficient to have $2,500 here and this and that. It's a bunch of distractions. What this township needs is a way to fund the shortfalls. And one of those shortfalls is going to be this bill that we get from these students. And they're all going to be Villanova students that got the good neighbor guide from,
Well, at
from
200
Laura and
citations,
Chris
it's
at
gonna
the
be
barbecue,
200
so they should know better.
At 200 citations, it's going to be $200,000 in fines.
Good.
That's.
And that's
it's
where
gonna
you start.
cover our overtime
And that's,
police.
and that's where you start.
Okay. So is there consensus? Commissioner Booker, Commissioner Abel, are you interested in pursuing? I didn't ask Commissioner Farhi. I said Commissioner Booker and Commissioner Abel.
To Jack's point, I think you continue to push these universities. We're going to lose some of that support. So at this point, no, I'm not in support of trying to go and force them into a pilot that they're going to say no to. I think we have a better chance of partnering with them and working with them on other items.
I think a pilot is a perfectly reasonable thing and that they should voluntarily enter into them. And we've got a report from them. In the past, we've asked them for a pilot and they've refused to do it. So I don't know. I don't think we're not taking advantage of what's on the table personally, but they should do a pilot. You talk to them about it again. I don't think it's going to. I think it'll be a waste of time. But I'm happy to authorize pursuing a pilot.
Okay, I think you have consensus. Yes, Commissioner Larkin, I'm going to assume you were a yes. Yeah, okay. All right, next up, any other new business? Okay, update on flood safety measures, Commissioner Abel.
Chief, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you talk about the armed gate during floodwaters.
Yes, Commissioner Abel. As you know, since the flood last year, several initiatives were taken on. The Township Manager directed staff to work on several of those, such as the water rescue training. Matter of fact, Sergeant McGuire had coordinated training for Public Works, police officers, added water rescue equipment to the police department. We did a public service campaign, and a mailer went out to every resident in the township as well. Also planning, the fire company is engaging in purchasing new equipment that's already underway, correct, Chief? And Bryn Mawr Fire Company as well, to make sure that they have all the needed equipment immediately accessible to them on fire response. We talked a little bit about signage in the community, and one of those types of signs is a water-activated, solar-powered sign that Commissioner Abel was concerned, wanted to see what we could do to always have an opportunity to notify the community. We're looking at putting that into the budget to try one of them. We want to make sure it's effective. A lot of times things, as you guys know, look very nice in a brochure, but we want to be able to deliver a high-quality product to the township. What we like about this is no matter what time of night, surge, rain, sudden onset, storm, in theory, this would activate as soon as the water hit a specific level. And we were going to put it on South Wayne Avenue as a first test site, which is one of Commissioner Abel's initiatives that he wanted to see done. So we're working with the manager's office and Mr. White for the 2020 budget. A lot of New Jersey shore towns, for those of you who traverse those areas, they do have them. There was a big push and a major installation, for example, in the town of Sea Isle on many, many of their streets, the exact sign. I actually sent that to the township manager, Mr. Norsini, and I know we have support from the fire company trying to have people turn around and don't drown driving into flooding waters.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So we'll get that as part of the budget.
That's correct.
Cycle. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chief Flanagan. Okay, next on old business is update on security cameras in area of Sugartown, Morris Road.
I'm gonna push this item off till the next meeting.
Okie dokie.
But just I do have just one question. Can we just get an update on the Newtown Road resurfacing?
That's correct.
October 10th. Okay, any other old business? All right, then I will call for public participation. Thank you for being so patient, Roberta.
Good evening. Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road. I do think we need to find ways in which we can obtain revenue sources from the nonprofit institutions in our communities, as they do represent a large portion of our land mass and do not contribute to things, as was mentioned before, such as police and firemen, which we all need. The second thing I would like to do is to make some comments regarding the possibility of using students as volunteer firemen. I just would like to comment that I think our universities and colleges may be a useful source, but we also have to realize that the student calendar is very limited, and so they're basically only here from probably the end of August until the end of April, and are also absent during significant holiday times when demand for volunteers is probably great. I was wondering if it might be possible that we might approach Valley Forge Military Academy, because they would seem to me to be an ideal place to do some training as part of their academic programs in emergency response and fire containment, and then use the Radnor Township Fire Department as perhaps a significant internship program where the students could in fact be trained there because of the nature of their program, and then do on-the-job work at our fire department, and they're usually there for several years. And it would seem to me perhaps a better fit than some of our liberal arts colleges and institutions, other than those that perhaps would be some nursing facilities we might want to be doing our EMT kinds of programs. But in looking at all the institutions that I've worked with in the township, I think the military academy might be a really good resource. Thank you.
Roberta, so real quick,
you, Roberta.
is tonight the last night to register to vote, and can you do it online?
You can Today is the last day
Okay.
to register to vote. If you haven't registered to vote, today is the last opportunity to change your address, your party affiliation, your name, or to register to vote. And for students, they may register to vote either at their home address or in their school address. One thing I was questioned about today, which the public may wish to know, is if there is a question that for some reason, your driver's license is not, numbers are not being matched with what's in the voter registry containment, and your application is being rejected for some reason, that is not a reason to be rejected as a voter, and that you need to then put in your last four digits of your Social Security number, and hopefully that'll fly. But under the HAVA Act, which is Helping Americans Vote Act, that not having the driver's license number or your Social Security number is not a reason to be rejected from the voter polls application. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta, and thank you for helping my constituent with that today. I knew you were the right one to get her to. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I will
So
entertain a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you.